Naruto and Azazel were silent as they stared at each other. The mix-haired man had a lively smile plastered over his face with anticipation as Naruto kept his stone-faced glare. Azazel's gaze shifted around the room before he shrugged. "So, you gonna say anything about that or?" "That sounds stupid." "Sure it sounds stupid," Azazel rebuffed, "but that's only because you aren't smart enough to appreciate it." This earned a spiteful glare from the whiskered boy in return. The fallen angel scratched his stubble and raised an eyebrow. "Okay, if you think this idea is stupid then that's fine. But let me ask you this. Where do you think you ended up?" Naruto's glare slowly turned into a frown as he looked aside and thought. That was the question. One he had been trying to figure out for over a year now. He had spent time in libraries researching. He had checked history books and bibliographies. But nothing even brought him close to finding that answer. "Do you think you're stuck in some kind of illusion? Or that big explosion blew you through time or whatever?" Azazel questioned, getting closer than he knew to hitting Naruto's prime theories before the older man laughed. "Let me shoot those down for you. First off, I'm real. I have been through more shit and done more shit than you or your ancestors have probably been alive, so that theory is shot. Also, you weren't blown through time. As easy and convenient an explanation that would be, bombs and time, space don't work like that." Naruto took a sharp inhale through his nose before grumbling, "Yeah, figured as much." "What about history? Does this world's past match up with anything from yours? Culture? What's familiar and what's different? Geography? Because if this place is different in any way from yours, you should know it would take tens and hundreds of millions of years for landmass." "Okay, I get it. Stop throwing words and explanations at me. Damn it," Naruto snapped back at the fallen angel. "If what you're saying is true then none of my ideas work. And even though I'm having a hard time believing anything you say considering," he waved his locks around for emphasis, "what you say makes sense. None of them hold up thinking like that. So, Azazel repeated. "So," Naruto's shoulders slumped, "I might be on another world." "Knew it. Stop bragging, asshole." Did he not understand just how shitty a situation this was for him? He hiked up his shoulders. "So what am I supposed to do? What does that mean? Can I ever get back to my world?" "Don't know." Azazel just shrugged. The dimensional gap and the infinite space around it are a pretty unknown subject to be speculating about. Most suggestions could be entirely theoretical on how to move through it. The force behind that explosion you followed was probably so immense it pushed you so far away from your realm that you might never make it back there. And that's not even taking into account the possibility that these spaces could be acting under a completely different set of physics or limitations. Perhaps movement is possible through the release of energy, and only when it's as powerful as that explosion you encountered. Or maybe movement is based around the passage of time, shifting space with every passing moment. Stop. Naruto grimaced and groaned. I think I taste coins." He glared at the man across from him. "I didn't understand most of what you just said." Azazel just smirked and chuckled wholeheartedly. "Ha ha ha ha, yeah, I figured as much. Just wanted to see what I could babble off before I was told to shut up. You have no idea how long it's been since I last had an audience, especially one as captivated as this one." The blonde devil didn't appreciate the poor pun at his expense and just glared at the older man. "To be honest, I have no idea what to tell you about if you'll ever get back to your own world. But I'm inclined to say that your chances aren't great." "Fuck. My thoughts exactly. Going to a complete different and foreign world beyond our knowledge? Man, that would be awesome." Azazel dreamily looked off and smiled. "Oh well. I guess I'll have to settle for the second best option." "What would that be?" "Sitting here and wait for you to tell me everything about where you came from and how you think you got here." Naruto narrowed his eyes. "No goddamn way. Doesn't it hurt to say that? And that should tell just how much I am not willing to touch the subject with you." He still hadn't worked up the nerve to tell Rias and the others who he was before coming to Kuo, and he liked them 1,000 times more than this prick. "You kidnapped me. You locked me up. You gassed my unconscious several times. I'm filled up with so much of that stuff it comes out with my coughs and farts. There's no way I should tell you anything, plus I have to pee." "Oh, that's right." Azazel suddenly realized the situation he was in and nodded. "We gotta figure out a way to fix that. If I put a cup under your crotch, would you pee in that?" "I'd piss on you." Naruto deadpanned. "Get anywhere near my penis and I will do whatever I can to piss on you." Testy but fair. Azazel shrugged as he climbed up to his feet and rotated his shoulders, getting the soreness out of his body after their little ricochet session. He walked out the door. I'll focus on finding a way to convince you to tell me your past while you keeping holding in the golden flood. If your kidneys start to fail, give me a call. He said as he closed the soundproof door behind him. Freaking bastard. Shit, should have taken him up on the cup offer. Devil. You wanna tell us what the fuck that was about, jackass? Yuto regarded Issei from the corner of his eyes as Asia focused on healing his wounds. He tried to deter her, saying his injuries were minor and that he would be fine with some rest. However, Issei kept a hand on his shoulder and forced him down while the nun went to work healing him, Issei glaring down at him from just a foot away. Yuto felt the numbness and pain start to lessen under the relief of the emerald glow. However, his rage from being so painstakingly close to the Excalibur blades and his disdain at the fact that he had failed to destroy even one of them in confrontation still caused a fire to burn in his stomach. He buried it down and attempted to feign disinterest. I'm not sure any of that garners an explanation. They were members of the church wielding holy blades. I believe I acted quite predictably given the situation. Except we called a truce with those people. Which you would have known if you bothered to show up at the club today. Issei chewed him out with a growl as even Asia flinched at the rise in his voice. The brunette devil glared at the knight accusingly. Do you even know what the hell is going on right now? Fallen angels into the town? A bunch of these crazy swords all over the place? I know about the swords. Well, do you know that Naruto-senpai has been missing for the last 2 days? And we still don't know anything about where his is or what happened to him. Yuto failed to comply and just lowered his head. No, I didn't know that. His eyes conveyed a look of shame and guilt for having to hear this news secondhand. He opted to ask Asia for clarification in order to avoid enraging Issei any further. What happened? We don't know. Asia sadly shook her head and looked down at the area she was healing. Bucko-san called and informed us that Naruto-san had suddenly disappeared and his apartment seemed to be in shambles. Bucko-san initially suspected that Naruto-san got into a fight with someone, but he hasn't made any contact at all to inform us. She says she isn't able to pinpoint his location because something is wrong with his evil piece, and without any leads or knowledge. Asia's face fell into a gloomy expression as she tried to stifle her worry and appear strong. Yuto could notice little tears fill the sides of her eyes. She must be so desperately trying to hope for the best and try to ignore the obvious signs that points towards the worst possible outcome. What's your deal with those swords? The blonde knight looked up at the pawn that had steered the conversation elsewhere with a frustrated frown. The crazy stuff you were saying about going after those holy swords even if you die. It sounds like the kinda shit one of those characters from a really dark manga talk about. The ones that get themselves killed. Issei narrowed his eyes. So what the hell? Yuto lowered his eyes in shame. It doesn't matter. Oh, you little fucking Yuto. The knight felt a worrisome pit fill his stomach at the stern, angered tone of his king's voice calling his name. He looked back and saw Rias making her way over with a stomp in her walk. Akeno and Kaneko following behind and taking notice of the massive crater in the field. Yuto sighed as he stood up. Bucko. His head snapped back as the firm slap echoed in the silence of the night. He felt his cheeks sting and noticed the others looking at them in surprise. He turned his head back around to face the glare on Ria's face. The redhead spoke in a short, tempered tone. What in the world were you thinking? Yuto merely stood there in silence as the red sting on his cheek started to become more prominent. He didn't have much to say. He didn't tell his king, his master, his savior, anything about this because he didn't know why. He just couldn't. The idea never even crossed his mind once. What this was his burden, his duty, his cross to bear and drag along for however long it may take. The ramifications it might create. The problems he would face finding the job. Whatever might happen because of his crusade was a sin he should bear by himself. He wouldn't force the people that had saved him to bear it as well. I was thinking that this was my chance to get my revenge. To finally fulfill the mission I promised I would fulfill to everyone I lost. To give meaning to the whole reason I was resurrected in the first place. The reason you were resurrected was so that you would join my side, so you can keep living, Rias protested, furious at her servant's blasé attitude and cold words as she shook her head. "You're supposed to be by my side, not turning your back on us completely for your personal crusade. A crusade that will put you in opposition against not only the church, but the fallen angels as well. A crusade that will bring you nothing but pain and despair. One you'll die from." "That may be." His face didn't change from its mask as he looked at Rias with his vacant eyes, "but it's still one I need to make." Rias was unsatisfied with that response, her shoulders shaking and her seafoam eyes filled with irritation. She held her breath before it came out as a sigh of disappointment. The lovely Gremory heiress looked back up at her, "Knight, sadly, I know how much this means to you, Yuto. How much this drives you. And remember I told you once that I would be there to help you fight your cause when you were ready." She shook her head, "But now is not that time. When all three factions can be involved in this. When one wrong move could very well spark the second coming of war. I can't let that happen." "I know you can't, bucko. And I'll make sure by every means possible that you and the others can't be blamed for this. Whatever is happening with these swords, I can put a stop to it now." The blonde's eyes lowered in shame seeing the expression on Ria's face before he spoke. "I'm sorry if I'm coming off as ungrateful. I can't begin to express my gratitude for what you've done for me. The home you gave me. The love you've all shown me. Being the family I never believed I would have again." His cerulean eyes glinted with sadness. "But I have to do this. This was what keeps me forward. The only thing I can do to respect my comrades' deaths and give them peace. The peace they've been denied." Yuto looked around the clearing at the people that had been his new life for so long. They all had different expressions looking at him, varying between concern and disappointment and even understanding. He didn't want to leave them. The thought of maybe never seeing them again terrified him to his core. But when he looked back around, his old friends, the ones he grew up with, the ones that had been with him through his very first life, the ones that allowed him to run free and escape while they were killed. Unjustly, unceremoniously, like cattle, like nothing, used for an experiment that was probably never going to work, and when it became clear, they were merely just a mess to clean up. He couldn't let that be their legacy, that they would die uselessly for a sword like that. No way. Not when those blades were so close. He had spent so much time researching and tracking, trying to find out where Excalibur could be. But now they were here, right now, and this might be his best chance to do it. The handsome blonde teen started walking off the field in silence. He stopped at the edge of the street, looking back to see them just watch him leave. Issei looked like he was just barely containing the desire to punch him as Bucko watched him leave sadly. He preferred the slap. He preferred 100,000 slaps. That would be less painful than leaving them. But he had to. "I'm sorry," and Yuto walked out of their sight. Devil, Sona walked through the halls of the old school building late at night. Her eyes panned around the hallway before landing at the door she was coming upon. The door was slightly ajar and a bright light slipped through the crack to give the dark hallway some light. When she pushed the door open, she saw the Orc Club room almost completely empty, save for Rias sitting at her desk with a forlorn expression on her face. The redhead didn't even lift her head to address her arrival as Sona crossed her arms. "You're alone?" Rias finally seemed to register her oldest friend but answered with a sigh. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "We aren't taking requests at the moment. I told Akano to help Issei in Asia back home and for Kaneko to call it a night." She rubbed the bridge of her nose like it was her only answer to the headache developing in her lobes. "It's been a very hectic day." "I heard," Sona mentioned while walking into the room and sitting down on the couch with a huff. She crossed her legs and leaned back. "So Uzumaki-kun goes missing. The church sends a vanguard into the territory illegally. There's a fallen angel experimenting with an ancient weapon somewhere in town. And Yuto has decided to take it upon himself to hunt for the pieces of Excalibur by himself." "Kiba-kun?" Sona was surprised at that revelation as Rias gave a solemn nod. She blinked and sighed in disbelief. "I didn't believe he of all people would do that." "I did," Rias mumbled while getting out of her spot and walking over to sit beside her friend. She plopped down by Sona unceremoniously and groaned, not even bothering to keep up the image of a respectable, civil lady in the sole presence of her best friend. Rias covered her eyes. "I always suspected that if something involving Excalibur came up, he'd become obsessed again with trying to find and eliminate them. I just thought I'd have more time to prepare and help him when it did. By the time I saw him again, he was already past the point where I could convince him to calm down. Sona let out a little chuckle and reached over to pat Ria's head. You certainly picked a rather rowdy group of people to find interest in, didn't you? Yes. Ria said with no humor as she ran her hand down her face, I certainly did. It's not just that. Ria sat up a little and looked down at the table, Naruto's disappearance. We used our available resources to look into Uzumaki-kun's sudden disappearance. Sona knew where Rias was taking the conversation, but with the news that there are fallen angels in the territory. I thought he might have gone to do something. Rias said, the last bit of hope in her voice bleeding through. He had some personal business he had to take care of or something only he could do. Oni-sama suggested that there was even a possibility that he could have gone astray and abandoned us, but I wouldn't believe it. After what he said to me, I knew he meant it. Rias paused before she let out a very heavy, loaded sigh. I couldn't believe there was a chance he could have fought someone and lost. After what happened in the raiding game, I thought he might be stronger than anything we would ever face. At least at our level. Sona understood her train of thought. In a time of relative peace like this, and in a territory the devils had claimed for their own, there wasn't much immediate danger they would expect to face. A stray devil every now and then. Some sorcerer or crackpot sneaking in to see what they could get away with. The most pressing issue they had faced recently was that fiasco with the rogue fallen angel cell that had made Issei, Naruto, and Asia join Ria's peerage in the first place. Hell, they weren't even expected to fight in raiding games until they were 18. But this wasn't a usual danger. This was big, menacing, fierce. But this isn't at our level, Sona said simply beside her silent best friend, with an enemy of Kokebiel's scale on the loose here, and his strength. What if he had went to Naruto to interrogate him, captured him, and all this time we've been looking, just torturing him, hurting him because he wanted information about us? Things Naruto couldn't possibly know. Rias. If that's what happened, if he captured Naruto and hurt him, and if he's toying with the weapons that caused Yuto so much pain. Ria's head had lowered and her shoulders were shaking with gritted teeth. If he's doing all these things to my peerage, then I can't just sit here. I've already informed our families of the situation going on here with the church and the fallen angels. Sona quickly interrupted her with a level voice before it took on a tinge of worry. They told us to stand down and not interfere with this operation until further notice. Rias. I can't let you jeopardize this truce. I know what it means. The Gremory heiress muttered softly. I understand what I should do. The proper actions I should take as an emissary of the devils and the next head of the Gremory house. I know. She looked back up at Sona and showed her the sadness in her eyes as the sea tree heiress' eyes softened as well, but I don't care. Sona just reached an arm around Rias's shoulders, bringing the girl in closer to rest her head on Sona's shoulder as she comforted Rias. I know. Rias just closed her eyes and accepted Sona's comfort, despite how little it did to actually calm her uncontrollable thoughts. She hoped she could see Yuto back with them again, the same kind smile he showed them before he took up his sword and stood proudly like the knight he was always destined to be. And Naruto. She didn't know where he was, or what was happening to him, but she just hoped he would be okay until they found him. Please be okay. Devil, Saru, Tatsu, Nei, Tori, Mi, Ushi, Inu, Uma, Tora, I, Hitsuji, Yu, Saru, Tatsu, Nei, Tori, Mi, Ushi, Inu, Uma, Tora, I, Hitsuji, Yu, Saru, Tatsu, Nei, Tori, Mi, Ushi, Inu, Uma, Tora, I, Hitsuji, Yu, Saru Tatsu Nei Tori Mi Ushi Inu Uma Tori I Hitsuji Yu. It's not working. Naruto's entire body was shaking, his legs bouncing around despite the fact they were confined in their locks as he struggled to keep his mind preoccupied with other matters. Something mindless. Something distracting. Something other than running water. Or trickling streams. Or dripping faucets. Or magnificent rain that weirdly turned golden halfway down. Naruto slammed his head against the bed to distract himself as he started huffing for air. Okay. You that song from that thing Issei showed me. How'd it go? He closed his eyes and craned his head back. Shala, enchilada, me. Blah la 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 la. He's saying I. Shocking, oh god, it's not working. Just as Naruto started fretting that one of his kidneys may burst, the doors slowly opened to reveal Azazel with a lazy, bored expression. The blonde quickly stifled his moan and halted all jittery movement that may show he was about to burst. But despite his attempt to keep a cool expression, his eye twitched and his face twisted in discomfort as the fallen angel stopped and leaned against the wall in front of him. They just stood there in silence as Naruto waited for the man to say something. And after a moment, he thought the older man had just walked in to stare at him. But after a minute, the fallen angel finally spoke. The Gremory girl gave her the name Yuma Amano, correct? The fallen angel saw the young blonde look at him oddly as Azazel smirked and nodded. Yeah. That was the name Donasek and the others told me she was going by after her run-in with you lot. Naruto's mind went back to the trenchcoat-clad fallen angel prick that he had the misfortune of facing off against when he had first gotten involved with Rias and the Devils. The same jerk that threatened to kill him, blowing up a hydrant while he was next to it and leaving the shrapnel scars that ran up his arms. Naruto's face twisted in a scowl at the memory. But then his thoughts went to the fallen angel woman that had started all of this. The woman that attacked Issei, and when he chose to intervene she killed them both, leading to Rias resurrecting them as members of her peerage. The same woman that tormented Issei, used Asia, got the sweet nun killed, and nearly killed Issei. But then he remembered when Issei took back Asia's sacred gear by force, ripping it out of Reinare's grasp and the agonizing wail that followed as her wings exploded and her eyes rolled back in her head. When she awoke, the psychopath that had killed, tortured, and tormented them was no longer in her eyes. It was just a scared, confused, and terrified woman who had no idea who she was anymore. When a human has their sacred gear removed, they slowly start to shut down and die. When Reinare took that girl's sacred gear, she hadn't had enough time for it to completely fuse with her. That's why that dragon boy was able to rip it off her. But even then, it was too much for her. In that moment, she must have felt like every cell in her body was being torn apart in different directions. He scoffed, it was so bad her powers were obliterated and her wings disappeared down to the stumps. And her mind, in an attempt to protect itself from the agony it experienced, sectioned off so many of her memories that she was left as basically an empty shell. Rias said that everything that used to be a fallen angel in that girl was gone. Naruto said while remembering what Rias had told them, that her memories were permanently gone. Oh, nothing has to be permanent. Not if you try hard enough and have the right materials. Azazel leaned against the wall and lowered himself to the ground to sit across from Naruto. The fallen angel scratched his head. I went to go see her. See where she had gone after your friends had let her go. What she was doing. What happened to her? Donasek, Calawarner, and Middlet had begged me to find some way to fix her. And I thought about it, until I saw her. The older fallen angel stared forward, not even regarding Naruto as a fond smile came over his face. She got a job as a waitress in this cozy little restaurant owned by this kind old man and his wife. She becomes so popular that business is booming because of the pretty new girl that smiles so often. He scratched the back of his head. I even set up an anonymous scholarship program to help her pay her way through school. She wants to be a social worker. Azazel's light smile turned into an exhausted sigh as he shook his head. I won't say I condone what she did to you and your lot. Nor will I say I quite appreciate what your friends did to her to make her stop. But she's happy. More than that girl has ever been happy in a long, long time. Experiencing an agony far worse than any person should go through. Has done more to help her than staying on our side and waiting for this so-called peace to fall through. Naruto raised an eyebrow. So-called, yep. Azazel nodded. All three sides have stopped fighting. Not for the benefit of our people. Not because peace is better than war. Because we're at a standstill. Because we can't afford to fight anymore. We're teetering on the edge of extinction. And one more full-out war will spell out the end for all three sides. And we know it. But even so, there are people on all sides that grew up in this war. Survived in this war. Thrived in this war. Even knowing what might happen if we all start fighting again. Azazel just shrugged. They can't imagine doing anything else in this war besides fighting. The two men were silent for a moment before Azazel's hand outstretched and a small spear of light formed in his hand. Naruto instinctively tensed up near the weapon he knew hurt like a bitch as the older man examined his construct. You know, I've done more things in this war than I can even begin to count. The number of angels and devils I've killed. The number of people I've tortured for the greater good. The number of graves I've dug and filled with my kin. The fallen angel's eyes became filled with the light of his weapon before it disappeared into a swarm of particles when he crushed it. I looked back and I realized the pile of bodies behind me stacked really high. Naruto's eyes changed hearing the man speak so devoid of the smarm and cocky tone he had expected from the other times they had spoken. The mixed-haired man chuckled and looked back at Naruto. After everything I've done, I don't think I have the right to say that war doesn't serve a purpose. To end a feud between forces that have no other way to settle matters. To prove your ideals and ideas can persevere and defeat all other concepts that may oppose them. I suppose as long as you fight for a reason, you can find a purpose in war. But that was the problem, Azazel shrugged. I couldn't remember what we were fighting for anymore. I thought I might be fighting for freedom. That we don't have to repress or restrain ourselves. And they fought back because their ideals and philosophies detracted mine. But at this point I'm pretty sure we just fight and show such animosity for each other because our opponents are different from us. Ask the last several generations of any faction why we're fighting and I'd bet they would say because we always have. And what defense could I make to deny that claim? The fallen angel's thoughts went back to his brothers and sisters that were immortalized in the paintings of the Grigori main building. The angels he had once called family now gone from this world by his own hand. And the young devils, trained and raised to fight since birth to kill him, and the looks in their eyes as he struck them down. How many bodies were there in the wake of this endless war? And even if his side won, what would they have to cheer and celebrate about anymore? He let out a long sigh that turned into a whistle as he looked around the room. His eyes finally landed on Naruto and saw something strange in the boy's eyes. For the first time, the blue eyes that looked at him weren't on edge like he was expecting a fight or some trickery to catch him off guard. Nor was it anger or irritation at having to listen to him talk. The blonde was looking at him with something else in his eyes. Sympathy? Empathy? Whatever it was understanding. I know it might seem hard to believe, but I want this fight to be over. All of these fights to be over. The older man smirked and looked off with a dreamy expression. I'd rather be on the beach side. A good book in one hand. A cold beer in the other. And a sexy, young, and willing beauty in my lap ready to take me on a never-ending journey. Naruto groaned. Did you have to tell me about that last part? Have to? No. Azazel gave a hearty laugh at Naruto's grimace. But I just love the idea of bragging to other people about the sex I'm gonna have when this is over. He groaned and shivered at the thought. He opened his eyes again and saw Azazel slowly approaching him. He sat up in response, shying away as Azazel knelt down in front of him. What are you doing? Not a lot happened, but I can't say this experience wasn't fun. The fallen angel said with his voice filled with mirth as his hands landed on the locks around Naruto's legs. The points beneath his fingers clicked like buttons as he pressed a certain pattern into the locks. After a few more seconds, Azazel finished pressing the pattern and the locks around his feet unlocked with a mechanical hiss. When the locks fell, Naruto looked down at them in surprise as his legs spread out, the immense soreness from being confined like that for so long finally taking their effect. Azazel did the same thing to the ones around his arms, and once those fell Naruto was freed. He opened and closed his hands a few times before looking up to see Azazel pocket his hands and shrug. You can go now if you want. If you want to tell your devil friends about me and what happened, you can. With what's about to happen, I'm pretty sure it's just a drop in the bucket at this point. Naruto quickly scampered off the floor and dashed out the door. Azazel let a hefty sigh as he waited for the ringing of the door slamming open as the boy ran for freedom. But after a moment he never heard the door slam. Instead he heard the sound of a very long stream hitting water, a content moan, and the flushing of the toilet. A moment later Naruto came back in with a relieved sigh and sat down on the so quickly he bounced a bit. He actually smiled with joy. That had to be one of the best experiences I've had in my whole life. Well, when it's a good one, it has that kind of affect. Azazel pointed out while looking down at the young man lounging over the bed. He tilted his head, Why didn't you run out the moment I let you go? Naruto opened one of his eyes to regard the fallen angel before he gave an unconcerned shrug. What you said? I can't try to imagine that I understand what it's like fighting a war so long that I can't even remember why I'm fighting. But from what I've seen of war, what it's like and what it does to people, I can definitely empathize with you on wanting to see it end. Azazel didn't outwardly react to what Naruto said, but after a moment in silence he scoffed and chuckled. He looked down at the blonde with a smirk and raised one of his brows. You know, considering the situation, you shouldn't believe what I say so easily. What makes you think I didn't just make up that sob story to trick you and make you lower your guard? If that was your plan, then you should do a better job at telling lies. Naruto countered. From what I saw and heard, you meant every word you said. Azazel shrugged. Touché. So let me ask you something instead. Naruto sat up, enjoying the free mobility in his limbs after their extended confinement, and looked up at the older man. Why are you so interested in knowing about where I come from? And what happened to me? The possibility of there being endless other worlds that we could explore? Imparting on them our wisdom, and even the possibility that they may be able to help us? Infinite possibilities in which to explore? The older man repeated what he had explained to Naruto earlier with an amused grin. How could I not be curious? Plus, doesn't that sound like a much more intriguing use of time than waiting for a war to start up again? The blonde gave a small nod before asking again. But why do you want to know how I got here? And what happened to me? Because I've seen your expression before. The old fallen angel answered as he leaned against the wall and crossed his arms in weight. I saw that look on the faces of my old soldiers years back when they came back from the worst kinds of fights. The older man noticed the young devil's face go still, but his eyes turned for just a moment. Enough for Azazel to understand that he had probably hit the nail on the head. Must have been one hell of a fight. Naruto's eyes lowered for a moment before nodding. Yeah, must have been. Devil, fucking die. Naruto tried to keep his grip on the invisible enemy he had been left to deal with while Sasuke chased after the physical Madara. Whatever this thing was, it was squirmy and unruly as hell. Even with the combination of the seal pattern and black lightning around its body, it refused to stop moving and fighting. At least the seal pattern that covered its body had covered it enough for Naruto to finally get a good look at it. This power-up or upgrade or increase or whatever the super old sage had given him was super helpful. He wasn't able to see this thing, but he was able to sense and guess where it was coming from. It was like sage mode. But, even stronger, he still couldn't see it like Sasuke, but he wasn't complaining at the moment. Was this a permanent thing, or did he have to return it after they kicked Madara's ass? Are you seriously worrying about how long you'll have this power? Kurama screamed in the recesses of his mind as the Biju yelled in exasperation. Focus on killing this bastard. Right. Sorry, Kurama. Naruto apologized as he focused on pinning the invisible duplicate for as long as he could. He went back into his head. Any suggestions on how I do this? We can try melting him. After everything he's done to us, I'd love to turn this smug bastard into a bubbly liquid. Sun yelled proudly in his head. If it's melting him, Saiken chimed in with a mumbled voice, I'm more than happy to help. No, rip him to shreds. Shukaku's high-pitched encouragement and crazed laughter persisted over everyone else as he tried to get his point across. Peel him apart. Disembowel him. Make him suffer, make him wail. Have fun with it. Hey! Naruto hollered and stopped the overlapping in his head as he yelled at his powerful visitors. If you guys are gonna be staying in my head, then speak one at a time. Naruto. Gyuki spoke up when given the chance as he said calmly and helpfully. Those black orbs behind you, imagine them as spires and stick them through the clone to pin it to the ground. Oh, good idea. Naruto held out his hand and pictured the weapon, and in a moment one of the spheres slipped into his hand with a different shape. Damn, these things were practical. They still had weaknesses, as his earlier fight with Obito and when Madara cut through one of them with a laser had proved, but still they looked useful. Naruto grunted as he stabbed the weapon through the invisible enemy and watched it extend into the ground. He did it a few more times and his prey was caught. He nodded and created a shadow clone to watch over it while he charged in the same direction Sasuke went. Sasuke might have gotten an upgrade from the old man too, but this was Madara. The slippery bastard had pulled out several hidden aces over the course of this fight and they couldn't risk him doing it again now that he absorbed the tree. He came up over the vast broken battlefield and saw Sasuke standing beside a kneeling Kakashi. He dropped down by their side. "Sasuke, what happened? Where's Madara?" Sasuke barely even seemed to acknowledge his presence as he just focused on glaring at the same spot. He finally did speak. "I was coming after him but he teleported away before I could finish him off." "Damn it," Naruto cursed before asking, "Well, did you get anything off him?" "I thought cutting him in half would be enough, but his legs got pulled in with the teleportation. Apparently his body doesn't adhere to the regular affect of being bisected anymore," Sasuke said with the smallest bit of irritation in his stoic voice as he clenched his fists. "I'll make sure the next one goes for his head." Naruto leaned away from his complicated friend and nodded. "All right, you do that. Just, focus on cutting him, okay?" Sasuke didn't even seem to laugh at Naruto's attempt to lighten the dreary mood before the blonde finally noticed that his teacher was in pain. He bent down to his side. "Kakashi-sensei, what's wrong?" "It was Madara," Kakashi said weakly as his hand lowered to show a small stream of blood coming from his left eye. He was extremely tired and weakened by the events of this fight as he looked up. Madara ripped it out and used it to travel to the other dimension. "He did?" Naruto reeled back in shock as horror gripped his heart. "But Sakura-chan and Obito are still over there, aren't they?" "I think so," Kakashi muttered as his eye flinched. "I'm sorry, but I don't think he'll be of any more use in the remainder of this fight." Something clicked in Naruto. While looking at Kakashi's injured eye, something inside him said that he could do something about it. He wasn't sure what or how, but he could. He just had to touch it. He raised a hand. "Kakashi-sensei, can you stay still for a sec? I think I might." "Naruto," Kurama roared in his mind, "there's something coming." Naruto felt something like an alarm go off in his head as he turned back to stand beside Sasuke. They watched a familiar spiral formation ripple through the air and got ready for a fight. However, when the spiral finished, an injured and unconscious Sakura was carried under the arm of Obito, who had a black rod sticking through his right bicep while black Zetsu remained secured around his left side. The older Uchiha gasped for air, his arm going numb and Sakura slipping from his grasp and onto the ground. "Sakura-chan." Naruto went to help the pink-haired girl who moaned in pain. "Obito," Kakashi struggled to speak but continued, "What happened?" She tried to fight Madara. To keep him away from the Rinnegan as long as she could. But Madara was too much. His body froze and he buckled to his knees. "I can't move anymore. I can't feel my arms or legs." "Hold on." Sasuke stepped forward. "I can get that out." "No, don't come any closer." Obito's body lurched forward and the black goop around his body extended and stretched out. It knocked Sasuke, Kakashi, Naruto, and Sakura away several meters before he started standing up in a disjointed and shaky fashion. Obito gasped. "I can't control it any longer." "That's right. You can't." Madara's deep voice permeated the tense and silent battlefield as a second spiral formed behind Obito and Madara popped out of it. His arms wrapped around Obito and sucked him into the spiral gate to bring him into the other dimension. "No!" Naruto laid Sakura down and sprinted forward to catch them before they were gone. Naruto reached out his hand but the end of Obito's leg started to disappear in the spiral. They were getting away. Just as Naruto thought he had failed, Sasuke suddenly appeared between him and the spiral tear. He thrust one hand in, catching himself in the teleport and reaching out with the other to grab Naruto's arm. The young Uzumaki felt his entire body start to get sucked in by the powerful suction of the teleportation as his perception started to turn and spin as well. He caught one last glimpse of Kakashi and Sakura behind him before he disappeared into the hole completely. Devil. When Naruto's vision cleared, he had landed in Obito's personal dimension of empty void and square-like structures. He heard Sasuke grumble beside him as they forced themselves back up to their feet to fight. But, the sound of something squelching and Obito's scream got their attention and they looked over to see Obito stumbling on his feet. His body slouched over and the black gunk on his left side was the only thing keeping him standing as Madara covered his own face. The eldest Uchiha's lower body was already reconnecting as Madara lowered his hand. The horns around his head started to grow out and a black rod slipped into his hand. The Ten Tails Jinchuriki turned and faced the two of them with a growing smirk. His eyes were both Rinnegan now. His mission was complete. He had achieved his full power. You can't begin to imagine just how enlightening this power feels. He closed his fist a few times and nodded. With this, I'll be able to imprint the infinite Tsukuyomi onto the surface of the moon. But I can't help but feel. He looked back up at them. Like you two will be thorns in my side while I try and do it. There's more of them. I know. Naruto could feel another group of those strange clones come into existence around Madara as he reached up to his head. He grabbed the horn decoration over his forehead and tore it off violently, pieces of it falling to the ground around his feet. Once it was gone, it revealed a small slit down his forehead while he closed his eyes. Zetsu, step back. I don't need you getting caught in this. Of course, sir. Black Zetsu's nasty voice agreed as he carried himself and Obito away. The slit over Madara's forehead slowly opened to reveal a strange combination of Rinnegan ripples and Sharingan red and commas. Madara's eyes opened again, his piercing purple orbs focusing on them as he smiled. I think I'll finish you off in here before I return. Naruto narrowed his eyes and tensed his muscles. He felt Sasuke do the same beside him, his left hand glowing with electricity that slowly extended to shade a blade around his fist. Madara just smiled, the black rod extending out into a complete shakuho. He spun it into his hand before slamming its end down hard enough to crack the white ground beneath him. Sasuke and Naruto charged forward, Sasuke pulling his lighting blade back as Naruto extended his hands and let two black balls change into staffs in his grasp. He charged in, swinging at Madara's smug expression before he felt his weapon stop against a solid, powerful surface. Naruto clicked his teeth in anger as he knew that Madara's shadows were protecting him. With immense power, Naruto was flung backwards and forced to skid along the ground before he raised his weapons up to block the follow-up attacks. Madara smirked before he leaned back to avoid the swipe of the lightning blade coming for his head. He turned and faced Sasuke directly as he spun his weapon around and charged the younger Uchiha. The two Uchiha exchanged attacks at blinding speeds, their weapons disappearing in flashes of black and blue as they parried and avoided each attack. Sasuke dodged and danced around the attacks Madara threw at him as the Jinchuriki swayed around the ones aimed at him. Naruto tried to hold off all four of Madara's shadows but found himself quickly overwhelmed by their speed and ferocity. He swiped out at where he believed their heads were, throwing one of the rods to force them back as Naruto gained some distance and crossed the index and middle fingers on each hand. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A mass of clones appeared and fought the Madara's back as best they could. Naruto could feel the experiences come back to him as a dozen of his clones were already destroyed in a matter of seconds. But still his numbers persisted, and after a few tries he overwhelmed the shadows and led his clones to attack the primary enemy, Madara. The bastard smirked, throwing his weapon up in the air as he clapped his hands together and covered them with lightning. He extended his arms, creating two lines of electricity from both hands that connected to his shadows on the other side of the Naruto horde. They crossed over, slicing apart all of Naruto's clones and reducing them to smoke. Naruto took the chance to leap off the back of one clone and into the air for safety. When he noticed Madara grinning up at him, he roared at the top of his lungs as the aura around him extended and shaped itself into a giant fox. The giant fox let out a deafening roar as it brought its paw down on Madara, cracking the white surface and sending a powerful shockwave out from the impact. Naruto's eyes widened when he felt the paw struggle against something and looked through his translucence to see Madara completely unharmed. He hadn't even raised his arms as his shadows had come to defend him, holding the massive claw up while Madara lowered his shakuho before raising it up against the paw. The giant fox was knocked back onto its hind legs but Naruto roared as a tailed beast bomb formed in front of him and fired down at Madara. The Jinchuriki returned his shadows into himself and flew away, dodging the massive explosion that vaporized the ground where the attack struck. Madara floated over Naruto's head and smugly grinned down at the boy that failed to hit him. The oldest Uchiha had to quickly turn in the air to avoid the ethereal purple blade that stabbed towards him. He looked over to see Sasuke floating in the head of his complete Susanoo. The young raven-haired boy narrowed his eyes as he made his giant body swing its sword, creating a powerful shockwave but Madara evading it by flying over the sword. Naruto and Sasuke started to combine their efforts, waving their blades and tails around widely to catch the powerful Jinchuriki as he continued to invade them. He released his shadows, the invisible clones shooting out to intercept the Titans with enough force to know them off their foundations. Naruto roared, dissolving the orange and gold fox construct. He landed on his feet, a rod appearing in his hand as he threw a hand out with a black orb flying at Madara's head. The Uchiha swung his Shikuho into the ball and knocked it aside as he intercepted Naruto's strike. The two exchanged quick attacks, their weapons blurring into lines of black as Naruto grit his teeth tightly. Forcing Madara to take a step back, Naruto raised his hand and created a Rasenshuriken that he quickly threw at his opponent. Madara charged into the attack, jumping over it before it could reach him. Naruto yelled and expanded his technique, but Madara simply flew over it before it could reach him. Naruto created several more and threw them out to catch the Ten Tails Jinchuriki, but missing as Madara flew away. Naruto looked back to see Sasuke holding back the invisible shadows, leaving him to handle Madara. That was just fine. He created two clones, each one reaching back as he extended two ethereal orange arms for them to grab. They yelled and propelled him forward, Naruto pulling his hand back as a ultra-big ball Rasengan formed from his palm. His chakra extended out, holding the massive attack out as it inched closer to enveloping Madara. The Uchiha cackled and threw out his hand, bolts of plasma firing from his palm that danced over the Rasengan and blew it up before it could reach him. Naruto barreled through the explosion of their attacks and came at Madara with ferocity. Black and white came together in his hand to form a beast ball, and he molded the chakra to form a ring. Madara saw this happen and held out his hand as a small black ball formed over his palm. Naruto yelled, "Beast Ball Rasenshuriken!" Madara roared, "Chibaku Tensai!" The two attacks collided and created a massive explosion that rocked the entire area. Madara was propelled up into the air as Naruto was blasted down into the ground so hard his body made a trench along the way. But Madara quickly caught himself, stopping his rapid ascension and remaining in the air for a moment before looking down at his opponent. The elder Uchiha smirked as he floated down by Naruto's injured form, the blonde resting in the furrow he made in the ground as he gasped and caught his breath. Madara lowered himself and slowly started to walk over to Naruto's side. He took pleasure and pride in every step he took to stand over his downed enemy. Once he was dealt with, and Sasuke was killed, there would be no one left to stand in his way. They were admirable. They had put up more of a fight than he ever expected to face when completing this task. He would always remember these young men as powerful foes that had pushed him so far. But they would not interfere with his plan. Naruto lifted himself up on his hands, the orbs floating behind him as he looked up at Madara. The Ten Tails Jinchuriki smirked. "You've done well, Naruto Uzumaki. But in the end you could only make it this far." The blonde struggled, pushing through his pain to look up at Madara. "No matter who you fought for or why, my desire to complete this task was just stronger than yours." Madara raised his hand with Naruto's head in its path as the blonde looked up at him. He gasped for air, met Madara's eyes, and smiled. Why Madara's eyes widened and he looked over his shoulder to see Naruto rocketing towards him with his hand outstretched. Was it a clone? No, the one on the ground was a clone. He passed the truth-seeking orbs onto it while he hid in the smoke of their combined attacks. He tricked him. Naruto let out a desperate roar as he flew down at him with his right hand out, the sun pattern around his palm becoming clear as day. Madara turned to intercept him. But the clone behind him extended his hand and fired an orb at his back. Madara turned on reflex, holding out his hand to knock the projectile back before it could reach him. But the orb disappeared, and Sasuke appeared in its place. He had teleported in place of the orb. El Limbo, where were his shadows? Sasuke had immobilized them all, and had waited for this opportunity. Madara swung his arms out to block the two boys as lightning shot out from his palm. Sasuke barely avoided its path while Naruto took the attack but barreled through it. They both yelled and made contact. Naruto on Madara's right shoulder and Sasuke on his left. The Jinchuriki's eyes trembled in horror. 6 paths, Chibaku Tensai. Ah! Madara let out a ghastly roar with enough force to knock Naruto and Sasuke back a few meters.
The elder Uchiha cried out in pain as his body started to warp, balance, constrict, and stretch in every possible manner. From his pale body, the forms of the Biju started to mold from his skin and pull from him in every direction. With a yell, Madara pulled them back in with sheer will as his eyes started to dart around, and no. And not this close. Not coming this far. I can't be stopped now.
His body distorted and he lost his mind in the chaos. The eye in the middle of his forehead was slowly eclipsed by a white ball as his defeat had been finished. He lost. No, with the last of his strength, Madara created a black bar in one hand and a Chibaku Tensai in the other. He held the little ball out towards Naruto and the blonde suddenly felt himself get pulled in. Naruto flew towards Madara's warped body. What the? If I die, Madara turned and thrusted the black bar towards his prey. You die with me. Naruto held his hand out for the balls to turn into a weapon but they were too slow in getting back to him. Naruto just narrowed his eyes, pulling his fist back to attack Madara one last time. And throwing it at thin air as he suddenly appeared somewhere else. Naruto heard the sound of pierced flesh and looked back as his eyes widened in shock. He looked over to see Sasuke had taken his place. And even with the black bar sticking in his chest, Sasuke's eyes never changed as his hand was covered in lightning. He pulled back and stabbed Madara through the head, where his third eye had once been. Sasuke focused his gaze, Amaterasu blazing out where he had skewered Madara through the head. Blood dripped down Sasuke's chin as he coldly growled, "That's for my family used, and my brother, now die." Hhhhhhhhhhhh. The white ground around them started to break and rip apart as it came flying in towards Madara's burning body. Naruto lost his footing as the ground beneath him started to lift up. He felt an immense, ungodly pull start to come from Madara's body as debris and rock flew at him. Naruto tried to escape the oncoming rocks before he looked back. Sasuke was still impaled by the black bar. Naruto turned back and prepared to charge in. Don't. Even amidst the pandemonium and noise, Naruto heard Sasuke's words as clear as day. The young Uchiha looked at him, his eyes finally changing out of their Sharingan and Rinnegan forms. More blood dripped from his lips as the rocks came in to conceal them. Just before they reached, Sasuke shook his head, "Just run, idiot." Sasuke and Madara were completely overwhelmed by the growing debris. Naruto's eyes widened and he started running towards the growing sphere. Sasuke. Naruto, don't. He hesitated hearing Kurama yell in his head with desperation. You need to get out of here, before you're caught in that thing. Sasuke's in there, Naruto yelled as he looked up at the growing ball of white rock. You guys are in there too. You didn't get out in time. We know, but if you stay here any longer, you'll be crushed. Yuki warned him, you need to get out of here. But, yes, Naruto-kun, Matabi added, this will be for nothing if you get caught in it as well. Sun roared, run you fool. Find that Obito guy and head back home. Kurama tried to reason with him, once we're back, we'll get as much help as we can and see if we can talk with the old man. We'll get our bodies and Sasuke back, but you need to go. Gah! Naruto grunted as he was punched across the face and sent tumbling into the broken ground. He flinched at the pain in his cheek and looked up to see Obito standing over him with blood coming down from his right eye. Oh Obito. You? Zetsu's rough voice yelled as he made Obito's body move and grabbed Naruto's neck. The blonde grabbed the wrist strangling him as Zetsu spoke. You ruined it, all of it, all my work, all my effort. Everything I did to bring her back and you rendered it into nothing. What are you talking about? I've been trying to bring mother back, I wanted to bring her back and let her have the world again. The grip around Naruto's neck tightened. But you ruined it, you damned my only chance forever. Well, I hope it was worth it, because you're going to die alongside them. Oh Obito, Naruto choked out, fight this thing, if you can hear me. He's dead. Naruto's eyes widened as Zetsu laughed. What, wasn't he the only way for you to go home? Well, I killed him, cut through his skin and pierced his heart completely. He's gone. And I crushed his Sharingan. The blood coming from Obito's eye dripped out a little more. Now you can never go home. You're stuck with us for all eternity. But how was he supposed to get back now? How was he gonna free Sasuke and Kurama and the others? He couldn't do it alone. If this guy killed Obito, How could they do anything now stuck in this bleak place? He could break into the ball and get them out, but what about Madara? Would that work? Could he keep him sealed and get his friends back? Naruto. Kurama's voice rang out, so solemn and reserved. There's nothing we can do now. He's gone. I think we're all gone. But don't fall to this guy. But Obito is dead. Don't let this bastard puppet him around anymore. Naruto's grip on the wrists strangling him tightened until he felt the choke weaken. Zetsu looked down in shock as two orange arms came off Naruto's back. Naruto growled out with watery eyes, I don't know what you are. Or what you're talking about. But if your plan was to use us, you failed. You bastard, I'm done with you. The orange hands grabbed Zetsu and Obito's corpse, die. Naruto threw them up into the air. He opened his palm and created a beast ball Rasen Shuriken. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath and accepting this fate as he threw his attack up at Zetsu. D-damn-you-you-you-you-you. Zetsu and Obito were obliterated in the blast from his attack. Naruto watched the explosion burst out above him before the flames and smoke started to get pulled in by the winds of the gravitational pull. Naruto looked up at the giant ball of stone and debris before he noticed black fire start to seep out of the cracks. His eyes widened, what the hell? Naruto, that thing isn't stable, Kurama roared as Naruto started backing up. Madara's body was in flux when this thing formed around him, with all of our energies tearing him apart. And he was being burned by Amaterasu too. That was the core of this rock, an unstable, immense fire and all our energy. You can't stick around. You have to get out of here before it collapses and blows up. Don't waste your chance. Run, kid. Naruto quickly turned around and dashed away from the burning, growing moon as fast as he possibly could. He had to run over floating slabs of white rock and avoid the pieces that flew towards him by the gravitational pull. It was so mighty that the orbs on his back even started to shake, but he persisted forward as long as he could. He wasn't sure how long or far he ran, but it never seemed to be enough to get away from the burning rock. He ran and ran until finally he came to the end of the line. The white stone spires just stopped, and there was nothing but black space as far as the eye could see. Naruto looked back at the unstable moon. Guys, I can't go anywhere else. He saw the body start to glow and shake. I think it's gonna blow. The orbs. Use the orbs to protect you. Do it now. Naruto willed the balls around him to stretch and expand, connecting together and forming a tight orb around him as he braced himself. It was unbelievable. The power and force he felt push against him as that giant ball of stone and fire finally erupted was like nothing he had ever felt before. Even through the shell he could feel the explosion wash over him like a tsunami over a seashell. It was terrifying. It was too much. He couldn't hold it anymore. Hold it, Naruto, Kurama yelled. Don't let up for even a second. We won't be able to stand it otherwise. Kurama, Naruto said through grit teeth as he tried to focus and protect himself against the explosion. I need help. Get the others. I can't. They're gone. Gone? They disappeared with the blast? Their bodies were at the center of this thing when it went off. We lost them. It's just us. I can't hold out much longer, you have to. Naruto noticed cracks along the shell. Kurama, just a bit longer. I am not gonna die. We'll live through this, and find a way to fix it. I'll get back and we can help everyone, just hold out. I'm not. The crack finally gave, the shell shattered and Naruto felt an immense pressure blast against the center of his forehead. And it all went black. Devil, he wasn't sure how long he had been here. It was just dark. Was he still alive? He was sure. He couldn't tell if he was in pain or not. He couldn't tell if his eyes were open or not. It was all just so black. He wasn't sure when it happened. Maybe between one of the times he was drifting between consciousness and sleep. But the darkness had changed. It was now a myriad of different colors and combinations. Was he alive now? Or maybe this was just the next step before reaching nirvana or heaven or whatever. Then he saw something. An image moved like a blur in front of his eyes. It was big, and it flew. It was red, the most glorious red he had ever seen. It let out some kind of roar, one so powerful that Naruto felt it reverberate through every cell in his body, even while he couldn't move. His eyes started to water as the massive figure disappeared out of his limited vision. But then something else appeared, another blur. This one was closer, but he still couldn't make out what it was. It looked human, but he couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, or if they were old or young. His eyes began to drift shut as he felt the stranger's hand on his forehead. Leave. Uoff. Naruto gasped as his eyes suddenly opened and he found himself lying beneath some trees and the blue sky. His vision darted back and forth, his eyes sensitive to the sudden sunlight before he took a moment to readjust to it. When he could see clearly again, he realized he was lying in the grass and gasping for air. He attempted to sit up but every inch of his body tinged with agony at the smallest movement. He toppled back over the ground, panting heavily as he grit his teeth to stop a moan or cry from leaving his lips. After a moment he started to crawl, pushing through the pain as he propped himself up against a tree. His eyes slowly opened as he looked over himself. His orange jacket was burnt up to the ribs and the rest of it was in tatters. There were cuts and slits all over the pants and in his legs as well. His sandals had fallen off at some point too. And the mesh undershirt was broken into pieces as well, revealing some spots along his chest that were bruised and lacerated. Naruto slowly reached up and touched his forehead, feeling a small cut and a thin line of blood dripping down to his eyebrow. Naruto lowered his hands and leaned back into the tree for full support. He tried to catch his breath. His throat was so dry he coughed just trying to speak, Kurama. He closed his eyes and tried to enter the space he and Kurama shared deep in his mind. But no matter how hard he tried or how long he did it, it didn't seem to work. His eyes opened. Kurama? He hoarsely repeated. Kurama, answer me. Say something, damn it. No reply. Naruto took a deep breath and just crossed his fingers to create a clone to help him look around. But the moment he tried to mold his chakra, it felt like his insides were being shredded by a rusty knife. He screamed in pain and stopped trying before the pain got any worse. Naruto bent over and puked over the grass as everything started to come back to him. The tree. Madara. The other dimension. Sasuke saving him. Zetsu trying to kill him. The explosion. Kurama and the others. They were gone. Everyone was gone, and he was. Tears started coming down his cheeks and he stifled his cries as he struggled up to his feet. Once he had found his footing, Naruto slowly started to walk forward while using the trees for support. He failed to stop that explosion, and he couldn't get home with Obito's Sharingan. He was stranded in that place. So how did he get here? When Naruto finally left the trees, he spotted a city along a long stretch of black pavement. But it looked like a much different place than any he had seen before. Limping forward and cradling a possibly broken arm, Naruto made his way towards that place before he could pass out. And while he walked, he took notice of the sign that welcomed him. Now entering Kuo, Devil, I walked down that road, came up to that town, and walked through it before I passed out. Naruto's eyes lowered at the memory. I woke up several months later in a hospital in an unfamiliar place surrounded by strange people in a world I didn't recognize. I could barely mold enough chakra to create a clone before my entire body started writhing in pain and it disappeared. I couldn't gather up natural energy from this new world. Trying to summon anything was useless and Kurama wasn't responding. I wanted to get back but after a while I realized I couldn't. I don't know how I got here and I had no way of getting back. Azazel looked down at the boy silently after he had told his story. To be totally honest, he wasn't expecting it to be so grand and adventurous and weird and impossible. If he wasn't for certain this boy was from another world, he would have disregarded that story as the fantasies of a really messed up kid. But he was from another world. Maybe. Azazel just chuckled. Well, I guess I should say sorry that the first things you met when coming to our world were those two antisocial weirdos. Although considering you were floating around their home, you should be glad they just threw you here and didn't just disintegrate you. Wait, what? Never mind. Azazel pushed off against the wall and walked over to the bed. So you lost your energies. I guess that would explain why no one thought you seemed any different when your chakra was about the same as any normal person's. Ever since that explosion, I haven't been able to form my chakra properly. Naruto held his chest. When Rias put that evil piece thing in me, I could slowly feel myself getting accustomed to the natural energy in this world. My body is starting to recover properly but I still can't get to my chakra. Well, of course you can't.
Not after getting caught in an explosion of energy like that. Azazel pointed out as his tone took on that of a teacher trying to educate a less than apt student. After suffering such injuries and floating around the dimensional gap after being bombarded by different chakras and energies, your system is completely out of sync. It's like, imagine your body is like a river or a sewer. He shook his head. No, wait, that's gross.
Actually, a sewer is a pretty good comparison. The fallen angel looked at him strangely before shrugging. Well, after everything that happened, the sewer has broken down. It collapsed on itself and nothing is getting through except for a few leaks. The chakra you have been able to use before the pain starts acting up. For the last year you haven't been able to do anything with it. But then that little lady gave you an evil piece, and your system started to repair itself. Naruto looked over himself before a glint of hope came to his eyes. Does that mean if I wait a little longer?
It fixed the structure of your system, Azazel interrupted, but the energy and flow and shit inside is still messed up. You can't use any more of it until it's fixed.
Fixed? Naruto thought for a moment before standing up. There's a healer in our group, could she do it? Twilight healing deals with physical injuries. It ain't gonna be much help fixing the mess inside you. Azazel shot his suggestion down. No, if you wanna get fixed, you're gonna need someone who can sort through and fix your energy. Well, how do I find someone who can do that? Oh, I'm sure there's someone around who can do that. Azazel said with a knowing, almost teasing smirk that made Naruto's eyes narrow in irritation. But before he could voice his displeasure, but I should probably warn you now. You might not get the chance to fix yourself.
What? Naruto questioned as Azazel regarded him with a serious glare. The fallen angel spoke again. Let me ask you something, kid. Do you think you'll be able to defeat everyone in this world with that senjutsu? Naruto looked at him strangely before his eyes turned in thought. I'm not sure if that ability was commonplace or as rare as winning the lottery where you get the TV, the car, the game console, and the pretty showcase girl all in one go.
That comparison was way too rare. No one gets that lucky. It sounds like you're just showing off. But here people know all about senjutsu and natural energy. Not everyone can use it, but people can develop ways to fight against it. Look at me. He flexed his left hand and Naruto finally noticed that it wasn't wrapped up anymore. I'm already healed from our fight the other day.
That was a strong hit you landed, but it wasn't anything new. And even though we fought for only a minute, I'm pretty sure I know how to fight with it. Azazel crossed his arms and smirked, heightened perception and reflexes. Increase in power, durability, and speed. You can sense things around you. And you mold the energy around your fist so that even if you miss a punch, the energy around it can still hit your opponent. I'm sure there are some other things, but that's the gist of it, right?
Naruto scowled at the man's haughty smirk. You're just trying to show off.
Maybe. He shrugged. Point is, after that confrontation with you, I've come up with some ways to counterattack. And considering the group you're associated with, I'm sure you'll get no small amount of action and fights coming your way. And you can't be certain you'll get your chakra or other abilities back someday. Sooner or later that trump card will be your only play, and people will start developing ways to beat you. You need to grow and expand your skills. Azazel looked down at the locks that had bound Naruto, and this test has proven that more than ever.
Test? Naruto repeated. What test? I designed these locks to negate natural energy so people couldn't use senjutsu. And they can't be broken by sheer physical strength. Azazel raised a finger, but they are totally weak to devil power, magic, and ki.
Naruto went silent, his blinks being the only actual noise before he muttered, what?
You know the destruction thing your Gremory girl does? Or the magic they perform where they summon lightning and fire? That's devil power. Every devil can do that with a little training. He looked at the blonde disappointingly. You could have opened those locks up with even a small burst of fire in your hands. So why didn't you? Naruto's eyes went hollow and his entire body went ashen in shock and horror. All this time and there was a way for him to break out. Remembering the special attacks and abilities Rias, Akano, and Issei preformed during the raiding game, Naruto lowered his head and mumbled under his breath, I don't know how to do that stuff. The fallen angel didn't even say anything. He just sighed and scratched the back of his head. You're definitely gonna have to fix that. He noticed Naruto's face burn with mortification. He enjoyed the sight of getting under the blonde's skin before he decided to drop the bomb on him. Your friends are getting themselves into a pretty big mess at the moment." Naruto's face lost all sense of humiliation and looked up at him. "An old friend of mine is currently trying to hatch a plan somewhere in the city. If he's successful, he might restart the war between the factions. He's already roped in the church, and unfortunately the way he's planning to do it has irked that swordsman in your group pretty badly. Looks like he's after blood and your friends can't control him." "What? It's okay." Azazel attempted to calm him down. "I'm monitoring the situation. I won't let it get out of hand."
"Too late, you jackass." Naruto walked past him and stormed for the door. "If they're in trouble, I have to help them."
Kokebiel has been fighting a war for as long as he has been alive, and that's a very long time. If you go out there now, people will die. Naruto stopped with that warning as Azazel walked out of the room and continued. "You could put up a great battle against him, but if you asked me to put my wager down, with him as determined as he is and you as you are now, I'd have to give it to Kokebiel. Then you'd lose that bet," Naruto informed him in a sharp tone. Maybe you and your group of ragtag friends will triumph. Maybe you'll fall and burn under Kokebiel's burning flag." The older man seemed to shrug nonchalantly at the thought. "We wouldn't know until you're all out there putting your lives on the line. Call me a coward or pragmatic. But I like to walk into a situation knowing what I'm up against first."
"If you're suggesting I leave this alone because I don't know I'll win, then just shut up." Naruto growled through his grit teeth. "I won't leave them alone again. I promised."
"I'm not saying you should abandon the fight. I'm offering to give you a little something extra."
Quote. Naruto turned back to Azazel as the fallen angel smiled. "I dabble in creating these things called artificial sacred gears. They're basically like the sacred gears, but I make and design their abilities personally. I won't go into the details of explaining to you just how I came upon the craft of painstakingly creating abilities that rival the ones created by the Lord himself, but I can tell you it's impressive."
"Are you trying to help, or just taking some time to stroke your ego?"
"What I'm saying is that if you want, I can give you one of those sacred gears." Azazel grinned. "I'm sure you've seen how useful those things have been in helping your friends fight in battle so far. Until you've found a way to fix yourself and learned how to properly control your new powers, you should take every advantage you can get."
Naruto looked down in thoughtful silence as he mulled over the prospect of the man's offer. "Would yours give me abilities like boosting my strength or healing others?" "Sorry, no can do." Azazel denied with a shake of his head. "Boosted gear is too powerful an ability for me to try and copy. The ones I do have are pretty good, but with it being artificially made they only last so long. But they can do some pretty awesome things." Azazel's pitch took a cautionary turn as he smirked. "But fair warning. Even if this new fight is stopped and things calm down, I can promise you that it'll only get more hectic and harder from here on out. After that last fight you told me about. Are you ready to get into something like that again?" Naruto was silent for a moment, contemplating the older man's warning. If he was feeling swayed or worried by the warning, then it didn't show up on his face. The younger blonde turned to him with a firm look in his blue eyes. "There are people that I want to stay and fight alongside." Rias and the others flashed in his mind as he steeled himself. "I thought I couldn't find it in myself to fight anymore. But I just forgot the same thing you did." "And what's that?" "My purpose to fight. But I have mine now, so I'm ready for anything."
The fallen angel grinned. "Well said." He stepped forward and patted Naruto's shoulder. "Now I didn't bring a whole lot with me, but there are some gems from my gears selection. And I think I got one you can have fun with." Devil. Rias' eyes were heavy as she looked down blankly at her desk. Her eyes drearily looked up from the mahogany and over the room. Akino stood over to the side, presenting herself like a proper young lady, but the tension and emptiness of the room clearly affecting her. Kaneko sat on the couch, her eyes more glum and saddened than usually as she didn't take a bite of the snacks in front of her. She probably felt so down she couldn't find her appetite anymore.
Rias understood the feeling. Just like the two of them, she hadn't been in the best condition either. She hadn't properly slept for days. The bags under her eyes must have been terrible, but she really didn't care. She couldn't find Naruto. Yuto still hadn't come back, and she felt like a leashed mutt being watched by all the devils in charge to make sure they didn't do anything against the temporary truce. She felt powerless like this. Pathetic. She raised her head when she heard the door swing open and the steps following in. She and the others looked over to see Issei stepping in.
The brown-haired boy walked in with a firm glare over his face as Asia followed behind him, the young girl looking worried and panicked about something. Issei stood up at attention and bowed his head. Bucho. I'm sorry. But I have come here to tell you that I'm going out to find and help Kiba.
What? Rias stood up. Excuse me. I didn't want to worry you, so I thought I'd come and tell you what I planned to do. Issei raised his head. I'm going to go looking for Kiba, help him with his fight, and then kick his ass back here. Issei. Rias walked around her desk to face the boy directly. I told you we weren't supposed to interfere with the church's operation. I know you did, bucko, and I'm so sorry, but I've got to go against your wishes. Oh no. Not you too. Rias was fed up with this. She stepped up to the younger man and faced him down. Issei leaning back under her intimidating gaze but not retreating. You will not walk in here and tell me you are going to disobey my orders. I know how it might sound, bucko. Issei's face twisted with guilt, but he pushed on. But I had to go out there and fight.
What do you not understand about this? What do you and Yuto not understand? Rias lost her patience and shook her head. I just want to keep you all safe. I don't want any of you to get hurt.
But it's too late for that. Issei shook his head. Naruto-senpai might have been hurt by these guys. And Kiba was tortured by those Excalibur people. I know it might seem stupid, but if he's gonna get into this fight anyway, I'd rather fight alongside him and get some payback for what they've done. I know it might seem like that, Issei, but this can only end badly. Rias shook her head. If a family as influential as the Gremory House gets involved in this conflict, our group would receive the ire of the oldest devils and families in the underworld. This would only end poorly for us. I figured that too. Issei nodded. But what?
But I know what kind of group we are. After that raiding game, you were supposed to get married, but you didn't want to, even though all those other families and influential people demanded it. And we followed you anyway. Because that's what kind of group Rias Gremory's peerage is. Issei gripped his fist and exclaimed around the room, we do what we think is right when our friends are on the line, no matter how much trouble we'll be in. That's what I think the orc is about. ... Rias and the others blinked in silence at Issei's strange exclamation before they noticed Asia raise her hand hesitantly. The blonde nun felt very conscious under their eyes but stated firmly, I agree with Issei-san, Bucho-san. It is really scary to think about what might happen if we do something like this. She affirmed herself and nodded, but I want to help Kiba-san and save Naruto-san too.
It was silent in the room after their declaration before Rias heard a pair of footsteps come up to her side. She looked both ways and saw Akeno and Kaneko were standing beside her. Akeno had that pleasant smile on her face that said she was up for anything Rias decided. Kaneko's face had shifted into a more serious version of her usual stoic expression, saying she was back and ready for war. Rias turned back forward and sighed heavily. And then she remembered what Naruto had told her before she decided to issue the challenge for their raiding game. That even if a choice is hard and painful and might not succeed, only she should be the one to make it, not anyone else. Rias sighed again before stepping forward and catching Issei in a tight hug. The pervert froze in her embrace and stuttered, "BBBB bucko? Thank you, Issei, for reminding me what I should be doing." She pulled back from the hug, noticing Issei's eyes swirling in his head and Asia fretting over the fact that he might have overloaded. Sorry about that. No problems at all. Issei smiled. Your huge boobs pressed up against me, which I am totally cool with. Disgusting. Kaneko muttered. The only problem is that we made a promise not to interfere with this fight. Rias said with a cupped chin before she smiled. But one of our own seems to be off by himself, misbehaving. Well, that just won't do. Akeno giggled and finished her thought. No, it won't. Rias walked through everyone else and up to the door before opening it. I suppose we'll just have to go out there and get him back. And if there are any fights going on at the same time. She turned back to her group and smiled. We'll just have to deal with them ourselves. Her peerage answered her with their own nods, cheers, and laughs as they readied themselves for whatever they would face. Rias nodded and headed out the door. Orc, let's move out. Devil, I thought I told you not to get in our way.
Sorry. Yuto's apology was half-assed at best as he parried a speedy strike from their enemy before disappearing around the trees. The blonde knight raised his chipped sword and narrowed his eyes. I didn't think I'd meet you both here. Just a coincidence.
You know, Irina pouted as she and Zenobia stood with their backs together and their weapons in hand. It's really hard to believe you when you say it with such an insincere tone like that. Yuto didn't answer as his eyes darted around in an attempt to spot their quick foe. This guy was moving so fast that even his knight properties wouldn't allow him to keep up. He need to keep on guard at all times. Ha 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 ha. Fried Selzen's psychotic laughter echoed around the forest as he dashed around them. His body was only a blur thanks to the increase from Excalibur rapidly as he ran circles around them. Not only do I finally get to skin sexy handsome Devil San alive, but I also get to skewer two scantily dressed beauties with my big, menacing saber. Irina's Excalibur mimic stretched out and curved around corners, cutting where she thought she heard their attackers taunt. The blade returned to its katana form as she yelled with a furious, disgusted blush. Don't say we're scantily dressed. This is the traditional church battle outfit. It has been for generations. And more importantly, Zenobia raised Excalibur destruction over her head and with a yell brought it down on the ground, cracking it before a massive blast of power rendered the ground and trees in front of her into dust. The sudden attack forced Fried to stop running before he got caught in the blast as she glared. What makes you think we'll give you the chance to skewer us with anything? Fried giggled, feisty. Yuto charged forward, his cracked blade slicing up against Fried's blade in a shower of sparks. The mad exorcist cackled and matched the knight's strikes swing for swing as their bodies blurred around the trees. Yuto focused completely on trying to overwhelm the man but found it difficult when his sword was so fast. He heard Irina and Zenobia call out behind him with warning to not interfere, but he ignored them. If Fried knew where the other pieces of Excalibur were, then he was Yuto's mark.
Man, don't know what I did to get your blood boiling, but you really want to make me bleed, huh? Yuto just grit his teeth and refused to humor the deranged man's banter before the white-haired priest smirked. Well, whatever.
Fried pushed back against the blade and Yuto's sword shattered to pieces. The priest reeled his blade back as Yuto jumped back. He reached back to pull out a new sword as Fried swung forward. Dragon shot. Fried looked aside and immediately jumped back as a powerful green blast shot by him and obliterated the trees. Fried looked over to see Issei with an outstretched hand and a scowl on his face. Shit, I missed. That's okay, Issei-kun. There was a powerful crack above them and Akeno had bathed her hands in lightning as she gave a devious smile. Allow me. Fried panicked and dashed away as a bolt of lightning struck the ground he stood on. He sped around the trees before an uprooted tree came flying at him through the trunks of a dozen others. He sliced through the tree before a blast of black energy came flying at him and he dodged as it destroyed everything in its path. Zenobia and Irina ran over when they saw Rias and her peerage arrive to their fight. The blue-haired girl questioned, I thought you weren't going to interfere? And that you'd never work with the church? Sorry, Rias focused her eyes on the white-haired swordsman, but I decided that if this fight is happening on my lawn, it's my responsibility. If that's a problem for your superiors or mine, I'm sure it doesn't need to be said where they can shove their complaints. Zenobia looked at the heiress in silence before nodding. Very well. She raised her destruction with both hands. If devils are involved in this fight, I rather they fight alongside than against. Yeah, way to go Zenobia. Irina raised her sword, that's the spirit. Bucko. Yuto came running up to her as Zenobia and Irina ran out to join the battle. The knight came up to his king. What are you doing? I said. I know what you said and I don't care. She glared Yuto down and poked his chest. As much as you think this is your crusade alone, you're my responsibility. You have been since the day I met you. If this is the time to fight, so be it. But it's a fight we fight together. Rias pushed past him as her destruction covered her hands. Now stop standing there and get back to what you were doing. Fried was being overwhelmed. Issei came charging in with his fist but Fried was able to easily dodge it with rapidly. But every step he took was being observed overhead by Akeno, who attacked with lightning strikes whenever she could. Kaneko pulled Tress out by their roots and threw them as Rias released blasts of destruction that nearly took off his head. Yuto came charging in with multiple swims as Irina and Zenobia did the same. Even with Excalibur rapidly, Fried couldn't handle this many people advancing on him. The priest's feet caught and he stumbled back into a tree as Irina, Zenobia, and Yuto all charged at him. They yelled, "This is it. Silly human. Even with that weapon, you find yourself overwhelmed, Yuto, move." Yuto's senses screamed and he jumped back while he still could. Xenovia and Irina watched his sudden reaction and did the same as a long spear of light came flying down and pierced the ground in front of Fried. The construct glowed before exploding violently in every direction. Ah! Irina was caught in the blast and blown back into a tree. The bark cracked beneath her impact as her battle garment was reduced to tatters as Xenovia ran over to her side. "Irina!" Xenovia assisted her friend up, the twin-tailed girl gasping in pain as smoke raised from the burns over her body. Xenovia looked over her partner in a panic as she shook. "Where did your sword go? Are you looking for this?" The others looked up to see a pale man with 10 black wings floating in the air, Fried hanging from his collar in one hand and the ribbon form of Excalibur mimic in his other. His cheeks were sullen and his eyes were blood-red as he gave a toothy grin down at the gathered devils and churchgoers. Rias narrowed her eyes. "Kokabiel." "What?" Issei questioned before looking back up at the man and feeling his immense presence over them. That's Kokabiel?" "It's an honor to meet the next head of the Gremory House, Mao Satan's little sister." He swung the man hanging from his hand. "I see you've been taking care of my little subordinate while we've been waiting." Rias could feel the tension behind her being emanated from her servants. Akeno and Yuto especially. Rias stepped forward and crossed her arms while glaring up at the old fallen angel. "So you finally appeared yourself. What does that entail exactly?" "It's quite simple." Kokabiel gave a wide, mocking smirk with half-lidded eyes. "Now we don't have to wait anymore. We're ready to proceed with the plan. We may only have 5 of the 7 pieces of Excalibur, but that's more than enough to start. We're going to attack this town. And then the next one. And the next one. And so on and so on." "Massacres?" Rias asked. "That's your grand plan?" "That's just the start. I kill everyone in this town in the devil territory and then I attack another one. Then I attack a church territory. And once I'm done with this little genocide, the factions will go back to war."
Rias' eyes widened. "War? You actually want to restart the war?" "Of course I do." Kokabiel made a deranged chuckle as he grinned. "I'm so bored with this pseudo-peace bullshit. I have to hunt and torture devils and angels in secret. And I'm sick of it. So I decided I was finished with waiting." He raised his arms challengingly, earning an annoyed grunt from Fried as he was lifted as well. "I'm a fallen angel, using a stolen Kruch weapon, to kill the direct families of Mao. How would that not start a war?" "You sick bastard," Issei muttered under his breath. "It won't work," Rias proclaimed. "Your silly tactic will have no hope of initiating war." "Oh, won't it?" Kokabiel questioned. "We're all on edge. We're all ready for that one moment that breaks the stillness and starts the war again." He smiled. "Why don't I be that moment?" Rias was disgusted by this man's mindset. From what he said, it sounded like the fallen angel faction wasn't sanctioning this mission. This was all just the demented actions of one deranged monster and a handful of fools that followed him. Rias swallowed the bile in her stomach having to look at this man again before she asked, "What did you do with Naruto?" "Who?" Kokabiel inquired. Rias and the others went silent at his answer as his wings flapped and he flew in the darkening sky. "This will be your last day. I hope you find some way to enjoy it before it all ends." "Bastard!" Xenovia jumped to her feet while Asia focused on healing Irina. The blue-haired girl ran after the flying fallen angel and yelled at his retreating back, "Get back here!" "Wait, Yuto, don't!" The swordsman stopped and looked back to see the stern look on Ria's face as she watched him. She shook her head. "I know where he is going. And I doubt running into that fight will do any good." Yuto looked displeased at what his king said, but the swordsman lowered his blade and waited patiently for what she suggested next. Rias looked over at her. "Bishop, Asia, can you stabilize her?" Asia gave a shaky nod. She's badly hurt, but if I try a little longer she will be alright." "Good. Akeno." Rias looked back at her. "Queen, I want you to call Sona and notify her about what is happening. We'll need her help. I'm going to call my brother." "Of course, bucko. I want you all to be ready. We're going to war." "Devil." Azazel walked out of the bathroom after washing his hands and looked up to see Valley standing at the end of the corridor with an impatient expression. The older man smiled at his frown. "Well, hello Sunshine-kun. How was your day?"
Make any new friends? Valley didn't even crack a smile. How are things with your new pet project? Oh, they were wonderful. Azazel exaggerated with glee. He threatened to pee on me. Then he peed. Then he told me how he arrived here from a parallel world. And then I alluded to all the crazy sex I like to have. Azazel finished drying his hands, and then I gave him one of my sacred gears. And then I washed my hands. Riveting. The younger man deadpanned. So how did it go? Oh, it went off without a hitch. I opened stuff up. I put the gear in, there were some parts left over, and coincidentally some parts missing. That's not a coincidence. The stuff that was left over might be what goes in the parts that were missing. Too late now. In the garbage they went. Well, if that's not malpractice, I'm not sure what is. The silver-haired boy pushed off the wall and slid his hands into his pockets. Kokabiel is on the move. The smile slowly left Azazel's face before he shook his head. Of course he is. The general governor sighed. Well, I guess we should keep an eye out to make sure he doesn't get too out of hand. Valley stepped over and headed for the bedroom door. Do you want to wake up your new friend? No need. Azazel shook his head with some mirth. He'll be out of it for a while. The operation will do that to you. He'll probably be pissed waking up and finding out that the battle already happened, but I'm sure you'll understand. You're sure? Absolutely. I can probably calm him down when he wakes up. Hey, Azazel. Yeah, I think I found a flaw in having a soundproof room. The fallen angel walked over to the boy's side and looked into the room. He was met with the sight of a giant hole in the floor where the bed had been, and broken all the way down into the apartment beneath them. The wizened old lady still had a slack-jawed expression at what happened as she looked up at them for some clarity. Hi there, he greeted with the same smarmy pleasantness he always exuded when greeting new people he required assistance from. Did you happen to see a young man come through here? Blonde hair? Bandages over his right arm? She nodded and pointed towards her door. Well, I didn't see this coming. I did. Shut up, Valley. Devil. Quite the predicament we're in. Sona commented, looking up at the dome of energy her peerage maintained around the school. Sona fixed her glasses, turning back to the redhead. What happened to not engaging in the fight while the church handled their mission? I was sick of sitting around and waiting. Rias answered, I was advised to take the initiative and see to this matter myself. And now we're here. To be fair, I'm certain this would have happened even if we didn't become involved. Rias turned back to see her peerage readying themselves for whatever they might face inside the barrier. But now we're going to make sure this matter is settled. And what about contacting the Maus? Sona inquired. Why haven't you informed Sirzek-sama about the situation? Probably the same reason you haven't contacted Leviathan-sama. Because it would cause a panic. Sona's face flinched with an iota of annoyance before Rias sighed. Oni-sama has already been contacted. Someone felt the need to do it while we were making our way here. She turned to Akino's sweet smile that hadn't faltered despite Rias' furrowed expression being directed at her, even though I protested against it. Sorry, bucko. Akino hardly sounded genuinely remorseful about spilling the beans to the higher-ups, but even though I knew it would embarrass you, I thought it would be appropriate for Lucifer-sama to be aware of the fact that such a powerful leader of the Fallen Angel faction was enacting his plot at this moment. I know, and you're right, it was the smart move to contact Oni-sama about this. Rias pouted, but I'm still mad. Ah, Rias, Akino cooed, you're so cute when you get petulant. Bucko-san and Akeno-san have a really good relationship, don't they? Asia whispered in surprise at the older girl's dynamic. They sure do. Issei watched with fascination as the two girls regarded as the two Oni-samas started to have a little argument. It really betrayed the confident, regal atmosphere they gave off in school. But then again, it was actually kinda cute to see Bucko look so childish, a rare sight. Focus. Alright, sorry, Kaneko-chan. He stood at attention after being called out by the freshman for his lewd stare. Bucko. Rias stopped arguing with Akeno and looked over at Yuto's stern expression. The blonde knight looked to the barrier. We can't waste any more time. Rias composed herself, clearing her throat and facing an amused Sona. Well, I guess now we should act like the vanguard and hold Kokabiel off before Oni-sama arrives. A little smile came to her face at the idea. Maybe we'll be lucky and take care of him ourselves. Sona did not look amused as Rias' idea. Rias, We raised this barrier in order to contain any damages that may occur, but I can't promise how long it will hold. The sea tree heiress fixed her glasses. We'll do everything we can to hold it in. But if Kokebeel really went all out, not only the barrier, but the whole town could become one big crater, I know. The Gremory peerage strode up to the glowing barrier that surrounded their school as Rias had a firm confidence in her voice, but we won't let it come to that. Sona sighed before her family sigil appeared under her feet and raised her up. She held out her hands to join her peerage's effort. We'll leave you to it, good luck. The orc stepped through the barrier and walked in to see the dark night sky replaced with a bright red tint. Issei hung back for a moment and tapped the barrier curiously, noticing that it was easier to get in than out. Era, I'm surprised, bucko. Akeno smiled while regarding her, king. That was quite a confident declaration you made to Kaichu about defeating a fallen angel leader by ourselves. Well, I suppose most of it was just bluster for Sona. And I'm not suggesting handling the destroyer of Sodom and Gomorrah is an easy task. Rias narrowed her eyes, but that doesn't mean we're just going to let him win. I'm fine with beating him up, bucko, Kaneko told the redhead. Thank you, Kaneko. Rias smiled. If we can knock him down, then I'd like to see his face when you get your knuckles in it. With pleasure. Be bucko-san. They turned back to Asia as the short blonde nun lowered her head. I know how important this fight is. And I don't want that fallen angel to destroy this town like you said. But I'm scared even thinking about being in this battle. She lowered her head in shame but quickly found herself sinking into Ria's bosom. She looked up and saw the kind expression on her king's face. It's okay to be afraid, Asia. I'm scared too. But the alternative is much scarier, and I have confidence because of my faith in all of you. She separated from the younger girl and smiled. Plus, don't forget, you have your knight at your side that'll protect you from anything. A bright green glow came from behind them and Issei stepped forward. He smiled and raised his gauntlet up with a smile. Issei-san? No worries, Asia. Issei nodded. I promise I'll protect you from whatever that pale prick throws at us, no matter what. Big talk coming from someone I can still beat in arm wrestling. Kaneko-chan, did you really have to say that? Ah, Issei-kun. Akeno cooed the young man. That's not all it takes to break your resolve, is it? Of course not, the pervert roared enthusiastically. Even if I'm not the strongest, I'll do everything I can to protect her and all of you. It's my duty. His eyes narrowed to the person at the head of their group. A job I'm supposed to be sharing with someone else. Their eyes turned to Yuto's back as he stopped just inches away from the main campus. Rias turned to him. Yuto. Care to wage in on that point? No, I can't. Issei-kun isn't wrong. The knight looked back at them with an empty expression. I can't be considered your knight anymore. I went against your orders, betrayed your expectations. And I still want you all to stay back so I may face this enemy alone. Are you fucking serious? The pawn yelled furiously and nearly snarled as he faced the handsome swordsman. Listen, Kiba. I know it sucks. I heard all about what happened and I wouldn't want that to happen to anybody. But you can't keep pushing Bucko away. Issei. His argument stopped immediately at his king's behest before she turned to her knight. Yuto. I understand why you're doing this. I can't condone it. I won't approve it. But after everything that happened to you because of Excalibur, and having to hear it come back to life so close to you, what else could you do but to take up arms again? Yuto looked at her sadly before nodding. Then you'll. But her voice became extremely stern as she narrowed her eyes. If you think for even a moment that I'll allow you to go off anymore to get yourself killed, for any reason, then you'd be mistaken. Her voice was firm and unwavering as Yuto was surprised by her sudden change. Whatever your mission is and whatever promise you made, you're my knight now. And if I decide that you don't die, then you better believe that you won't die. Yuto was silent, flabbergasted by her declaration. The tall blonde was conflicted by her response before shaking his head. Bucko. A loud explosion, roar, and shake of the earth stopped their argument. The orc quickly ran out of the forest and emerged into the schoolyard. To see the battle had begun. The school grounds were littered with massive beasts. Vicious hounds, with 3 snarling heads each preoccupied with either growling, barking, or slobbering. In the middle of the schoolyard they saw the blue-haired church warrior being surrounded by the Cerberuses, catching her breath with Excalibur destruction drawn. Up in the sky, Kokebile lounged back in a floating throne while he watched everything from above. He took notice of the crimson hair in the crowd and his piercing red eyes met her seafoam for an instant. But it was enough as a smug smirk turned into a ridiculing grin, his sharp teeth showing for all. "I'm glad you could make it for the endgame, devil." Kaichu, Saji shuffled on his platform. "What are the chances Gremory Senpai and the others actually handle this problem by themselves? If we are forced to face a renowned leader of the Fallen Angel faction, famous for waging battles during the war and for erasing Sodom and Gomorrah off the face of the earth, I don't have much faith in our chances," Sona bluntly stated as several members of the Stuko paled. Kaichu isn't wrong. Tsubaki agreed. "Unlike the Gremory peerage, we aren't combat-oriented. Our greatest strengths lie in outsmarting and suppressing our enemies' abilities, but we need prior preparation and planning for that, as well as an understanding of their strength and abilities. Something we do not have with a force as strong as Kokebile. At best we would be able to hold him off, keep him distracted while we await for Lucifer-sama's arrival. But we wouldn't be able to face him in battle, and there's no telling what kind of untold damage may be wrought upon the town." Sona felt their terrified gazes on her. "It's not our most favorable option, but it'll be the only one we have if Rias and the others fall. That was the worst-case scenario. At least with Issei and his balance breaker they had a chance of holding their own against that monster. But that may only hold him back for so long. Even so, we gotta prepared to fight this bastard. Saji, even if this guy outclasses us, Hyodo and the others still went in. Because they had to stop him and save this town. And we can't just fret," Saji proudly declared. "I promise I'll protect the student council and this city from Kokebile, no matter what." "Damn, I didn't know you were so noble. Sorry I underestimated you, council guy." Sona's eyes widened at the voice. She heard a pair of footsteps stop beneath her floating platform. The sea-tree heiress didn't even have to look down as she smiled. "Well, I'm surprised to see you actually turn back up." "You are? I was only gone for a few days. Did something happen?" "You have no idea. Rias was about to start a crusade to find you." Sona oddly found a bit of mirth returning to her voice. "You may find yourself wishing to stay hidden when you experience her wrath." "Hey, I just got back. Don't scare me now. Rias and the others are handling a great enemy inside. Kokebile, a powerful fallen angel with plans to bring back an ancient weapon to destroy the town and start another war. A cruel idiot trying to stir the pot? Seems simple then. Kick his ass and fix everything." A bit of an oversimplification of the matter. Sona smiled, but if that's what it takes then so be it. "So does this thing open up? Walk into the fray? Alright then." The footsteps started again and she felt another presence phase through their barrier. "Wish me luck." Wishing wasn't going to do anything, devil. Dragon shot. A massive blast of green energy barreled into the Cerberus hard enough to topple it over. Got one. He felt a large shadow loom over him as Cerberus heads showed their teeth. He leapt away from their attempt to eat him and flew in the air. Gonna have to do a lot better than that. The beast roared at him but was quickly silenced as a massive strike of lightning struck it. The three-headed creature died and a Kano flew off to attack another Cerberus. Issei's wings flapped behind him before he soared over to find his next target. Yuto dodged ahead lunging for his torso and slashed his sword against its fang. The beast jerked back and roared at him. Yuto stepped but stopped when he felt someone's back meet his. With his peripheral vision he knew the beasts had surrounded them, and felt a shiver go up his back. He immediately recognized the effect of the holy sword near him. "Looks like even you're having a hard time keeping up with all these monsters." "I've handled worse, trust me." Xenovia snapped back before her eyes surveyed their surroundings. "How's Irina?" Her injuries were extensive. Even with Asia-san's initial treatment, her condition was severe. "But if it puts you at ease, we've taken her in to care for her." "It doesn't," Xenovia answered before smirking, "but I suppose I owe you all for helping her. Enough to let me destroy that sword? You just don't let up." The beasts lunged for the swordsman and they struck back before they could be overwhelmed. Yuto sidestepped and slashed through one head's neck, a spray of blood coating his arms before he spun and broke through the teeth of another jaw snapping besides him. The night created another blade with sword birth to take in his other hand and started waving them around with expert precision, slashing through eyes and mouths. Xenovia jumped up high over a snapping dog head and landed between its ears before running up its neck. The blue-haired warrior turned the massive sword in her hand and brought Excalibur Destruction down on its back, WRAH. The massive sword dug into the beast's back and toppled it in a single strike. The Cerberus roared in pain, blood spewing and seeping out of every orifice before it fell over in a dead heap. Blood pooled under its mangled body as Xenovia charged at the next beast with a mighty roar. "Take this!" Rias whipped her hand out with a line of destruction extending out from it. It struck in front of the approaching Cerberus and forced it back as the beast roared with fury. Several other beasts started to approach them after hearing its roar, and Rias felt Asia cower behind her. The Gremory heiress narrowed her eyes. Ha! Destruction shot from her hand and barreled towards the swarm of beasts. One shot completely enveloped a beast, obliterating it before another blast fired from her hand. This one merely took off one head, but the beast quickly fell as well, the effect of losing one head clearly weighing on the beast. "Bibuko-san, stay behind me, Asia," Rias assured the terrified nun as she protected her from any approaching monsters. She kept the wave of monsters at bay from their healer while the others thinned the numbers. They were doing a splendid job, but the gallons of blood and dead Cerberus bodies littering the field was definitely not going to go over well with Sona. Her eyes turned up to the sky and saw Kokabiel resting on his throne and enjoying the sight of them killing his beasts. "I expected more of a great soldier like you, Kokabiel." The fallen angel smirked. "Whatever do you mean, little sister of Lucifer? You want to reignite the war? You're ready to throw the worlds into chaos, force hundreds of thousands of us to kill each other again, but you can't even find it in yourself to join the fight?" Rias spoke derisively and gave the old soldier the most demeaning look she could muster. "And I grew expecting you to be someone great and terrifying." If her efforts to get a rise out of him were having any affect, they didn't show as Kokabiel merely shrugged his bony shoulders. "I'm not fighting because there certainly is no need to." He waved his arm out. "Look around at your pathetic showing. I remember once when the devils were so vicious and feared that facing a squadron of them in battle made me feel tension so strong I thought I would choke. But now your kind has gotten so soft that you're being overwhelmed by a pack of Cerberus." He chuckled. "Then again, we've all gotten so complacent in this time of peace, so the fallen angels are no better." "You must be going blind as well as mad," Rias responded. "My peerage is handling your little swarm of monsters like the playthings they are." "Well," Kokabiel smirked, "I wonder for how long." She heard a faint gasp and looked over to see Kaneko being pushed back by a particularly vicious Cerberus. The short, rook's arms were covered in blood up to her elbow, and there were dead monsters all around her, but she looked winded. The three dog heads all snarled at her and slowly lumbered forward as Kaneko kept up her guard. "Kaneko-chan, Kaneko-chan, Kaneko." Rias and the others all went to go help their youngest friend but were stopped when spears fell in front of them and exploded. They were knocked back or forced to guard as Kokabiel laughed. "Well, little girl, I guess it's time to see just how overwhelmed you are." Kaneko was tired and trying to catch her breath after holding off and killing so many of the three-headed beasts. But now she was facing a much larger, much meaner Cerberus and feeling pretty winded as well. This thing had taken a bite at her and ripped the clothes around her shoulder. Just when she realized this Cerberus was sharper than the others, the beast swung its heads around and knocked her back through a dozen trees. It hurt, and now she was feeling sluggish. Her shoulder was aching, and the only reason it wasn't worse was because her rook characteristics toughened her skin. But she wasn't sure she would be able to kill this monster without taking even worse damage. Maybe if she... No, she wasn't going to risk losing control when Bucko and the others still needed her. It didn't matter if she was slowing down. Something like this wouldn't stop Yuto-senpai or Issei-senpai or Naruto-senpai. She raised her fists and the Cerberus lunged. She heard them call out to her. "Raw!" Someone came dropping down from above and crushed the center head before it could bite her. Kaneko's eyes widened in shock as the man stood up on the broken skull of the middle head. The left and right heads turned in to rip the man apart, but he kicked out to both sides and knocked the heads away violently. He ran up the back and jumped off, grabbing the Cerberus corpse by the tail before lifting it up and throwing it into the sky. It headed straight towards Kokebeel. Eat this. The fallen angel clicked his teeth and held out his hand as a spear incinerated the flying body. Well damn, the figure over her side thought that could do something more. He turned and looked down at her with concern. Kaneko, you okay? Kaneko finally came back from her disbelief and realized that the figure in front of her was real. He was still wearing the Kuo uniform, but it was wrinkled and worn out. His right sleeve was all the way up to his shoulder with a bandage around his arm. His hair was disheveled, his pupils a horizontal bar and orange coloring around them. And she could feel natural energy wafting off of him. And yet despite her fear of being around that power, she could not express the relief to see him again. Naruto. Senpai. Yeah, who else would it be? He knelt beside her, but seriously, you okay? You aren't hurt too bad or anything, right? Kaneko was too stunned to answer, but luckily she realized she wasn't hallucinating when the other members of the orc came running over. Their entire club huddled together, each of them looking at Naruto in complete shock as if expecting him to disappear at any moment. Rias took a tentative step forward. Naruto? Hey, he answered softly as he tried to show them all a smile. Sorry for taking so long. You're really here? Well, he shrugged. The hero always arrives. Ow. He felt a sharp pain in his side and saw Kaneko had jabbed him under the ribs. She had the most stern pout he had ever seen scrunch up her face, summoning as much of her rook strength as possible and started jabbing him in the side. Hey stop. What are you? Ah. He cradled his head and saw Rias frowning with her hand covered in her magic circle as she started slapping him. Soon enough the tall blonde was being assaulted with jabs and slaps from the two girls to varying degrees. The other orc members were watching with mixed reactions while Issei started stockpiling strength with his boost ability. Once he had waited long enough for Kaneko and Rias to get their licks in, he pulled his leg back and swung at Naruto's crotch. But the whiskered blonde sensed it coming and avoided the hit. Don't go for my balls, and stop hitting me. What the hell? What the hell? What the hell? Rias repeated with ire in her voice, accenting every word as she stomped up to the whiskered boy. She made sure her eyes met his, not even bothering to wonder why his eyes were slits again as she pointed up at him. Where the hell have you been? Do you have any idea how worried we were about you? What we thought happened to you? Naruto shied back and mumbled under her stern glare. Sorry. I didn't know you were so worried about me. How could we not be? Your apartment was wrecked. We had no way of finding you. I expected the worst. Rias yelled. Why did you leave? It wasn't by choice. Naruto responded. I just got grabbed one night in a fight. I tried getting out but I was tied up. Wait, so you actually were kidnapped? Issei looked shocked. What happened? Did they hurt you? Not really. Or at least nothing too bad. Akeno's face turned into one of unamused resignation. So, you weren't tortured either? Not really. Naruto looked up in thought before shrugging. Well, I mean my bladder nearly burst, but I don't think that counts. It doesn't. Did they try to get any information out of you? Yeah, actually. Mostly just personal stuff though. His face twisted with a grimace. He was really weird. Ria's shoulders lowered after seeing her friend and Pawn was still okay. But it wasn't just in relief. It was in an amalgam of relief, disbelief, confusion, annoyance, disappointment, exasperation, and barely contained anger at finding out that her anguish and worry for him over the last few days was apparently unnecessary. She stopped herself from reaching up and pulling on his cheek hard enough to stretch his whole face before she looked up at him firmly. Naruto, what happened to you? I'll tell you. I promise I will. But right now I think we've got other things to worry about. The heiress continued staring at him before relenting. You're right. As interested as I am to hear your explanation. And you can bet I'll get it. The crimson-haired devil and her peerage turned to look up at the man at the center of this havoc. We have more bothersome things to deal with right now. Kokebeel noticed the attention on him and gave a nasty smirk. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he felt a wave of immense power coming off the man almost unconsciously. And is that prick Koko whatever? His name is Kokebeel. He's an elite fallen angel who has come here to gather together the parts of a powerful sword and use it to start another war. He plans to kill everyone in Kuo to anger the devils. So I was right in calling him a prick. Very good assumption. Issei nodded. Alright. Then there's no point wasting time. The wind started to pick up around them so fast that their hair started to whip around from the force. They looked up at the blue and white energy gathering over Naruto's hand as a screech pierced their ears. It got louder and louder as a big blue ball formed over his palm, its sides stretching out almost like blades. The orcs stopped covering their ears to look at the Rasen Shuriken, many of them experiencing it for the first time as Naruto focused his glare on the seated fallen angel. Kokebiel's smirk changed to one of intrigue as he watched the new technique form. Take this. The wind pressure from throwing the attack was enough to make all the orc members shield their faces. As it passed, some of them looked up to see the attack move at blistering speeds towards the fallen angel that casually laid back in his chair as the new attack approached. He looked like he was going to take it head-on before the fallen angel raised his hand and fired a gargantuan spear at the oncoming attack. They clashed in midair, Kokebiel's attack striking the Rasen Shuriken in the center. The Rasen Shuriken pushed against the massive light attack, but the spear burst and released the jutsu's energy prematurely, causing a massive explosion to overtake the red sky and release a gust of violent wind across the campus. The orc protected themselves, covering their eyes against the wind that nearly blew them off their feet. Issei was quick to cover Asia as Rias and Akeno raised a barrier to guard them from the force of the explosion. The blast finally started to subside after a moment. They looked up through the fading smoke and steam that covered the red sky. That was quite impressive. The smoke drifted away to reveal Kokebiel still seated in his chair as if nothing had happened. His throne was higher and further away in order to avoid the blast radius, but he did not even look frazzled by what he'd just witnessed. He snickered, "I did not expect for you to have a power like this at your disposal, Lucifer's little sister. Not only a wild card, but also the Sekiryute, to amass such talent and power like this at ages so young is nothing short of remarkable. If you all had been part of the war years ago, I'm sure you would have made names for yourselves." He grinned in his slimy way. "A pity you have to die now, nameless and unrecognized." "Okay. That didn't work." Naruto clicked his teeth before digging his foot in the ground. "Let's try this." The blonde jumped up and sailed through the air towards Kokebiel. Naruto held up his hands as two Rasengans formed in his palms. He yelled and kept gliding towards his target as Kokebiel threw out his hands to summon an array of spears. He smirked and whipped his hand to send them flying out at Naruto. The blonde yelled, the pointed weapons clashing against his jutsu and veering off course while he made his way towards Kokebiel. The fallen angel chuckled at the sight of Naruto's residence. He made a spear before spiking it into Naruto's Rasengan while he was blocking another attack. The spear struck the side of the blue orb and exploded, blowing Naruto out of the sky. "Heads up!" Naruto righted himself and held out his hand as Issei swooped in and grabbed it. The pervert kept them afloat while Rias and Akeno came soaring in at the fallen angel instead. Rias yelled at the top of her lungs and released a massive wave of destruction. Kokebiel leapt out of his chair and flew upwards as her wave disintegrated his throne. His wings sprouted out as he heard the crack of thunder over him. He looked up and saw Akeno in her priestess outfit, bolts of holy lightning crackling off his fingertips. Her eyes bore down into the man as she yelled, "Take this." The concentration of her power came down in a mighty bolt. Kokebiel merely raised his hand to intercept it. He fended off the lightning like it was nothing as Akeno continued to grit her teeth and summon more power to attack. The fallen angel sensed the malice behind her attack and the venom in her stare. But he laughed, "My, how you've grown. I can't believe a little half-spawn was able to come this far without proper training." Akeno's eyes widened. "I can't imagine what you'd be like if you didn't turn your back on your father." "Shut up. Don't you dare mention that man. Oh goodness, did I prod the nerve?" Kokebiel goaded the young woman before his other hand stretched out and blocked the wave of destruction coming below him. He looked down and saw Rias trying to catch his flank as lightning continued raining down above. He shook his head. "You both are trying so hard. It's almost endearing, like watching children chanting and waving their arms to dispel a storm. Just die." "No," the fallen angel pushed out and sent back a blast of the respective energies the girls were lobbing at him. The pair was blown back by the recoil, Rias careening into the ground as her queen went sprawling into the sky. He laughed before looking aside and seeing the two boys coming back towards him. Issei yelled at the top of his lungs and spun around as the blonde in his hold became a yellow blur. The pervert yelled and threw Naruto at the fallen angel as Naruto held out his Rasengan. Kokebiel grabbed Naruto's wrist before his Rasengan could connect. The jutsu fizzled out and the black-haired man held the devil up by his wrist with a vicious smile. That's unfortunate. Hey! Naruto grinned and pulled back his free hand before clenching his fist, set. Kokebiel lazily dodged the fist towards his chin before patronized the teen. Boy, if you think, gah. Kokebiel's head jerked back violently as an invisible force slammed into his chin and knocked him further into the air. Kokebiel's grip weakened and Naruto pulled himself out as Issei came flying back in to catch him and lower him back to the ground. The two young men looked up at their opponent as Rias and Akeno lowered down beside them. The ladies looked a little worse for wear, but they didn't even seem to notice as they just focused up on the fallen angel. Kokebiel rubbed his chin to see if it was broken before he smiled. Well, that was a clever trick. So you can hit things without actually hitting them? I'll have to remember that. Tell me, boy, any other surprises like that? Just this. Naruto raised his right hand and held it out towards Kokebiel. The fallen angel waited for another blue orb or some new blast to come out, but Naruto slowly narrowed his eyes. He closed his fist and something glowed beneath the wrappings around his arm. 2x. Kokebiel raised an eyebrow amusingly before his head shot up again. He let out a pained gasp as he felt another powerful strike hit his chin and he faltered through the air. Rias looked at the action in shock before turning to Naruto for answers. Akeno and Issei did the same thing as the tall blonde grinned and lowered his arm. Rias caught sight of the bright glow beneath his bandages and looked them suspiciously. What was that? Something I got while I was away. Naruto tore at a bit of fabric and unfurled his wrappings. They fell into a heap by his feet and he showed his friends the new features over his forearm. It looked like a remote control with no buttons. The three of them looked at it in shock. This is Remote Looper. My new sacred gear. Sacred gear? Akeno repeated in shock. What the hell? Issei exclaimed. That's right. This one's mine now. I can set a point, preform an action, and replay its effect whenever I want. In this case, land a nasty punch against this asshole, and play it again when he wasn't ready. Naruto grinned at the sight of Kokebiel spitting out blood and wiping his chin as the blonde clenched his fist. We got the advantage with this. Naruto wanted to keep watching his enemy but felt a pair of hands firmly lock his head and force him to look aside. He met the annoyed, irritated face of Rias pouting up at him. She looked directly in his eyes. Naruto. Why do you have a sacred gear? I got it. No, she shook her head and sighed like a parent trying to stay calm while explaining something to their stupid child. You don't find sacred gears or get them. You either have one, or you don't. Well, I didn't. He raised his arm and showed her Remote Looper, and now I do. Rias closed her eyes and released her hold on his cheeks. That story. It better be a long, descriptive, and precise one. No detail 2-minute. What if I don't remember every detail? You better. Era, Akeno delicately placed a hand on her cheek and shook her head. He runs off, gets lost, comes back when we're worried, and brings strange things back at a whim. Are you an untrained pet? Maybe we should consider putting a leash on him? Issei chuckled. Yeah, laugh it up, fuckface. Naruto snarled and narrowed his bar-like eyes at the pervert. I hit a hell of a lot stronger in this form. You think your balls can take a kick for all your jokes? Issei's smile faltered and he unconsciously shielded his crotch. That's what I thought. Rias still seemed wary and looked down at his new weapon. And you're sure you can use that? Up to 10 times replay. The whiskered man boasted. I was supposed to give it some time to heal, but it's nothing I can't handle. He lowered his arm and winced before looking back down at it. Actually, there's a sharp pain, but it's nothing I can't handle. Rias sighed. Another sacred gear. And from someone who didn't have one? Kokebiel questioned before he closed his eyes and took a sharp breath. That damn traitor. Is he really so set on this peace plan that he'd sabotage his comrades? He let out a long sigh. No matter. When I'm done here I can bring this to the rest of the Grigori. Let them know he's planning against us. I might just get top spot once he's kicked out. Naruto winced and closed his fist a few times to get the sensation back. Azazel had warned him before going under that he needed time to rest after getting this gear. And when he woke up he did feel tired and weary. But he refused to just lie back while the others dealt with this guy. Sage mode was helping him stay up at the moment. Hopefully the arm wouldn't hurt whenever he had to use this gear, but right now he had to live with it. Repeating the effect of damage and stored up energy would prove useful in a fight. Naruto stepped forward. So hey, now that you're off your lounge chair, you want to come down here? The blonde attempted to goad the fallen angel. I mean, if you're scared I won't blame you, but I expected more from a scary. A bright flash of light from the gymnasium shut him up as the shine covered the entire campus. Naruto covered his eyes and heard the others yell as they did the same. The light died down, but they were still blinded by the effect. He could still sense what was going on with Sage mode. And that was what warned him to move. He leaned back as a huge blade swung for his neck. Naruto was quick to kip up to his feet and dodge again as the blade came swinging in at unnatural speeds. It somehow got even faster as Naruto had to rely on his enhanced reflexes to help him keep from getting gutted. He finally got his sight back and didn't recognize the sword or the massive energy pooling off it. But he did recognize the vicious, nasty grin attacking him. Come on, don't dodge. I just got this baby and she could use a good coat of devil blood to really give her that new shine. Fried cackled as he continued to press the blonde with his new weapon. He half yelled and half laughed, swinging his new sword down as it grew twice in size. Naruto had to catch his footing and jump back to avoid the sword as it tore through the ground like paper. The glowing blade returned to normal even as the psychotic priest whined and pursed his lips. Ah, no fun. I didn't even get disemboweling anyone. Issei's vision came back and he immediately felt sick to his stomach seeing his least favorite ecclesiastic, Fried. Hey there, Devil-kun. Long time, no maiming. Fried held up his glowing weapon and let it sway in front of him. When was the last time I saw you? Must have been when that sexy Rainare-san was getting her rocks off torturing you and that pretty little nun. And don't think I didn't notice her way back there, cowering and fretting to see me again. Ah. He squeaked, she gives the best reactions. Bastard. Issei raised his boosted gear. Boost. He made to engage the clergyman in combat, but Ria's arm raised to stop him. The redhead caster gazed down at the menacing, glowing blade that the crazed man held by his side. She looked back up and met Fried's eyes as the demented priest knew what she was thinking. The Gremory's eyes narrowed with disdain up at the fallen angel. So you've already put the pieces together? That's right. His chin bloodied, but he paid it no heed as Kokabiel smiled condescendingly. It's unfortunate that the blade is not complete yet, but as you can see it's still more than a match to chop you children apart. Good idea. The aura around Fried flared and he raised his blade. Let's get on that. Rias and the others made to protect themselves, but Fried already dashed at them in a burst of speed. Naruto had felt his evil intent coming and made to grab Rias while Fried reappeared with his blade overhead. But the glowing blade didn't come down fast enough before it was blocked by two other blades. Yuto and Zenovia yelled as they forced the blade back as much as possible. They couldn't get much ground against Fried and his mighty weapon, but it was just enough for Naruto to get Rias to safety. Issei and Akano were quick to follow before Fried could attack again. The two swordsmen jumped back as well to get some distance. He's already forged them together. The blue-haired churchgoer mumbled before she running her hand down her face. This is going to make bringing them back unnecessarily difficult. Rias approached her. Even so, thank you for your assistance. Considering we're up against several Excalibur swords forged together and a figurehead of the fallen angels, I could use as much assistance as possible. Zenovia admitted before looking to the devil group again. She took notice of the whiskered blonde that joined their ranks. This must be the man you all were looking for. He does look like a scowling cat. I look like a what? Let's focus. Issei nervously coughed and pointed back at Fried. So, is that what I think it is? Excalibur. Rias murmured. All four pieces Kokabiel has apprehended combined back into one weapon. It's not nearly as powerful as the original Excalibur, but it still has enough to turn the tide of this battle. If that blade cuts us, we'll be affected by the aura and left vulnerable to be finished off by that man. So avoid getting cut by the sword? Naruto smiled seeing the peeved expression she turned to him with as he shrugged. Just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. So how do we handle it? We don't, Yuto muttered as he summoned a second blade to wield. I do. Yuto, wait. The knight dashed fast enough to leave his friends in a cloud of dust as he charged the crazy priest. Yuto blurred and brought both blades down against Fried's pseudo-Excalibur hard enough to create a shockwave, but didn't break the holy sword. The two separated and Fried laughed. "Oh, this is great. I'm gonna carve a few pounds of flesh out of you first, handsome devil-san. Then after that I'm gonna work on slicing up the rest of your friends. I think I'll keep a lock of the big-breasted redhead's hair. Or maybe I'll keep the dark-haired girl's head for myself. Ooh, this is so much fun." "Shut up." Yuto activated his speed to try to overwhelm Fried, but was met with an equal burst of speed as the white-haired psycho activated Excalibur rapidly. The knight brought both blades into the holy sword as they clashed in a shower of sparks. Yuto spun around and struck the glowing blade over and over as Fried effortlessly parried the strikes. They separated before dashing back in, using their respective speed boosts to disappear from the naked eye. Kaneko and Asia finally made their way over to rejoin their group. The nun caught her breath before looking at the flashes of light clashing in the air. She could no longer see them anymore and marveled, That's amazing. I can't believe Kiba-san can move fast enough to match Excalibur's speed." "He's not." "Huh?" The nun looked around confused at the worried expression on everyone's faces while staring out over the field. "What do you mean?" "It means Kiba's not keeping up with him." Issei grimaced, "Not at all." There was another massive shockwave and the two figures reappeared. Except Fried was unharmed and Yuto was beleaguered by several bloody cuts across his body. The knight was panting heavily and clutching a broken sword. He struggled not to fall to his knees as they glared at the giggling priest. Hee. Looks like you just don't have the stamina to keep up with me, huh, pretty boy? Ooh. You always expect the handsome ones to be the best but then you find out they're all talk. I wanted to go over and over but you just lose all feeling in your legs. Such a disappointment. Fried blushed. But I did at least get a few good strokes in on you. Stop it. Yuto tossed the broken hilt and gripped his last sword tightly. He made to charge before a cut and gush of blood sprayed from his shoulder. He looked down in horror and saw a shimmering light sticking out of his flesh slowly form into a long, thin blade. He looked down to see it sticking out from the pseudo-Excalibur Fried was wielding. What? Neat, huh? Yeah, Excalibur transparency to keep it hidden and Excalibur mimicry to change shape. Lucky we got to snatch it off that hot little slut with the twin tails before we ran off. Fried chuckled with almost childlike glee at the pain he was inflicting on the knight. Wanna see something else cool? This is Excalibur Nightmare. Yuto's vision quickly turned black as if the world had faded around him. The agony plaguing his shoulder and other wounds similarly disappeared as he looked around in confusion. Isaiah. No, that can't be. Yuto felt a dainty hand grip his shoulder. He looked over it to see a young girl steadying herself. Her face was deathly pale and in pain. She sobbed, "What did you do?" "No, Isaiah, you were supposed to live. You were supposed to survive. To avenge us. To make sure we didn't die in vain." "What was the point, Isaiah? What was the point?" Yuto was surrounded on all sides by his old friends. The friends he grew up with in Holy Sword Project. The friends that died while he got away. They swarmed him, grabbing and tackling him. He panted for air and tried to push them off of him but couldn't find the strength. They clung to him as Yuto shrieked. And no, stop it, stop. Yuto's landscape quickly changed back to normal. But when he looked up he saw Fried bearing over him with Excalibur raised high and his monstrous smile. The blade came down on him before stopping inches from his face. Ah, fuck. Yuto looked up and saw Naruto had caught the blade between his hands. His hands started smoking and he grit his teeth through the pain. Xenovia quickly charged in and swung at Fried. The priest jumped back, pulling his blade out of the blonde's grip as the blue-haired warrior chased after him. Shit. Naruto looked down at his bloody and burnt palms. Even with the protection Sage mode gave him, the sword's properties were reacting badly with his devil body. He hissed and tried to close them. Okay, starting to wish I took Ria's warning more seriously. And no, Yuto moaned, pulling himself up to his knees. His eyes were heavy and his vision was tunneling around Xenovia holding off Fried. He reached out with a shaky hand. She can't fight him. She can't beat him. I have to be the one. To destroy Excalibur. No, Yuto was yanked back by his collar as Naruto looked down at him. You aren't doing shit while you're like this. In case you didn't notice, you're bleeding like crazy and can't even stand. Plus you couldn't even focus properly. You were slowing down and swinging like a crazy person. If you can't get a hold of yourself, then you're sitting this fight out. I can't. Yuto weakly threw his arm back as if to swat Naruto away, but it fell to his side. You can't tell me what to do. You don't know what's going on. Yeah, I do. Naruto responded. I know that you hate this sword and want to destroy it. But you're gonna get yourself killed fighting like this. I can't stop now. You don't understand. I understand watching someone lose themselves in revenge, Naruto yelled as he pulled Yuto up by his collar and glared into the younger man's eyes. I've watched someone I know, someone I cared about, get lost following his revenge. Till the point where he was getting harder and harder to recognize. So if you think I'll let you do that too, Kiba, then you're a fucking idiot. The pained blonde's resilience seemed to falter and his eyes watered. He wanted to fight, to argue more. But he couldn't. Naruto released his collar. Stay here, I'm gonna get Asia so she can fix you up. Yuto clenched his fist. Naruto running off to rejoin the group coming to check on them. Xenovia was being pushed back by the pseudo-Excalibur and its multiple abilities. And here he was. The goal of his revenge mere meters away. And he was in the dirt, blood seeping out and weak in the knees like a scared child. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Fried-kun. I know how much you like to cut things, but please make sure not to break Excalibur destruction. We need it if we want to add to the blade. Fried stopped attacking Xenovia for a moment and sighed as his shoulders sagged. Fine. But I can still cut her up, right? By all means. Yuto's eyes widened in horror as he recognized the voice coming into the field with them. He looked up at the figure slowly approaching them, taking a casual stroll through uprooted ground and bloody monster corpses. He spoke softly and without any urgency in his voice. He still looked old and almost kindly, with a soft face and bespectacled gaze that most would expect of a holy man. It was a lie. The most depraved, sadistic, heartless monster Yuto had ever met. The man that made so many promises and raised the hopes of the children he collected just to throw them away when he believed they had no more use. Like trash. Valpyr Galilei. You? Xenovia recognized him as well. You're Valpyr Galilei, aren't you? The genocide archbishop? Ah, my reputation precedes me. Valpyr nodded, graciously accepting the church warrior's recognition as if it were praise. Yes, that's me. The church reported you missing. We believed you were apprehended by another party, but you were taken by Kokabiel? And willingly? Of course. Valpyr nodded. Kokabiel-san was offering me the chance to pursue my wishes with the holy swords. And Excalibur of all swords. The old man smiled warmly. I could not pass up that opportunity. B. Bucko, who is that? Valpyr Galilei. He was a member of the church not too long ago. But he was exiled because of his experiments. Rias explained to them. He hid behind his collar, but that man is a butcher. He was the one that put Yuto through everything. The knight lowered his head as he heard Asia gasp and Issei curse on his behalf. She gave them a brief explanation of what Valpyr did when he still had power. What he aimed for and how he gained it. Hearing it again still hurt so much. Valpyr, Yuto yelled. The old man turned to him. Do you recognize me? Do you know who I am? No, the old man scratched his head. I'm sorry lad, but have we met? I was there. The blonde swordsman sat up, the pain from his wounds aching worse but ignored. I was part of the Holy Sword Project. I was there for every horrible experiment you forced on us. The old man still looked confused before realization dawned on him. Oh, yes. I remember one of the children from the project had escaped the facility the day we decided to terminate the batch. I'm honestly surprised to see you again. I was certain whomever breathed in the gas would die within moments, but it appears Lady Luck smiled down on you. Although maybe since you have now found yourself in the realm of devils, it's more appropriate to say you've been affected by a cruel turn of fate? Enough! Yuto yelled furiously as he punched the dirt. I want to know why did you decide to kill us? What decided as failures for you to just kill off like that? Oh no, my boy, you seem to be confused. You weren't failures. Not in the end at least. Yuto froze. What? It's true that while none of you proved successful in the effort to give regular people the natural ability to wield a holy sword, the experiment proved fruitful in other ways. Valpar reached into his sleeve and pulled out an ornamental vial. They helped make this. That? Zenovia's surprise garnered their attention. That's a blessing. It's a special property the church uses to bestow people with the ability to use holy swords like Excalibur. That's right. Valpar frowned. A bit hypocritical of the Almighty Church to exile me for my process but reap the benefits of its success. Partially why I joined Kokebiel-san's cause, I suppose. I may be more vindictive than I'd like to admit. He gave a simple shrug and smiled as he lobbed the vial over to roll in front of Yuto. There. It's true that you and those other children weren't able to use the swords because of your weak bodies, but you had the properties inside of you in order to wield them. So in the end we were able to isolate those properties, remove them from the corpses, and gather them together in the vials. With their influence, selected individuals can wield holy swords, even Fried-kun over there. Asia gasped in horror, Issei grinding his teeth and Naruto gripping his fists until his knuckles went white. Yuto just looked at the vial in horror before muttering, "You. This is what you made of them." "That's right. You can keep that if you want. We've discovered a way to mass-produce them so your fellow subjects are no longer needed. A little reminder of your friend's sacrifice." Valpar graciously nodded his head with a smile, "and a thank you for helping me get this far." The blonde knight shook as he grabbed the vial that trembled in his hands. He cradled it as his shoulder shook. He gasped for air before he felt a pair of arms circle around him. Rias comforted him, holding his shoulders and patting his head. "It's okay, Yuto. I had no idea it was this awful. That you were out through it by a monster like him. I'm so sorry." "I am sorry," the traumatized boy mumbled as he held her arms in an effort to find relief in the madness. "I know how much you want me to move past it. And I know you wanted to help me, but I didn't want you to. I didn't want you to be a part of this. Because this is hell." His eyes watered. "This is my hell. And I wanted to put a stop to it. Because they didn't deserve this. They had hopes and dreams. They wanted to be more than this. I had to make sure they didn't die just for this. He hung his head. "I'm so sorry." Asia started sobbing into her hands and ducked into Akino's side as the older girl comforted her. Kaneko clenched her fists as tears filled her eyes. Kokebiel scoffed as Fried cackled cruelly, Issei and Naruto both feeling their anger rise at the ridicule of the knight's anguish. "It's okay." A bright light emanated from the vial that nearly blinded everyone in the dome. Rias tried to shield her eyes and had to back away from the intense light. Yuto's whole world went white before he saw a black figure standing in front of him. The figure gently cupped his cheek. "We love you. We never blamed you for living. That's all we wanted. You still had a chance, and you've made it so far because of it. We're happy to see you were able to move on." His eyes widened to see the silhouettes of his fallen comrades come around him. But unlike the nightmare moments ago, their presence was warm and comforting. "But what about all of you?" Yuto looked down at the vial. This is what he made of you, after everything you've been through. "It's okay, Isaiah. We've moved on, and now you have to too." How? That vial. It's our gift to you. But I'm a devil now. I can't wield holy swords. This will. Trust us. This is how you can move on, Isaiah. Accept our gift, and live. Yuto looked down at the vial in his hand and felt the shaking stop. His old friends and comrades supporting him. His new family here for him to protect. The fear and hopelessness that had gripped him moments ago was gone. And with a steeled heart, he opened the vial, and this is kind of part 3. See you again in the next part.